Hello and welcome to the EcoCast by Actual Tech Media. Today's topic, supporting and enabling modern applications. On the event, you'll hear from experts at Pure Storage, Nutanix with Souza, Nebulon, OutSystems, Wind River, and Upbound. Thank you so much for joining us on another EcoCast event. We've got a great event lined up for you today. So many companies out there I know are challenged with modernizing their applications. We'll be talking a lot about that on the event today. Before we get started, we've got a few things that you should know about the EcoCast. First off, we at Actual Tech Media created the EcoCast and MegaCast event series to help educate IT professionals such as yourselves about the latest and greatest in enterprise technology, to help you do it quickly and efficiently, all in one place, to get all your questions answered, to find some of the most innovative enterprise technology in the world today and help you to solve your challenges. We're all former IT professionals here at Actual Tech Media. We know how tough it can be out there in the world of enterprise IT, and this event is designed to help. We encourage your questions. They're in the questions pane. Many have already found that and have said hello or good morning from across the United States and around the world, and we appreciate that. We also want your technical questions during the event. My name is David Davis from Actual Tech Media. I'll be serving as the moderator, and I'll be doing live Q&A sessions with each of today's experts, so keep your questions coming. We also have our Best Question Prize, and that prize is designed to help encourage your questions. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a moment. I also have some questions for you. I'll be launching some poll questions during the event, and of course, we appreciate your participation in those polls in advance. We also have a number of handouts there in the Handouts tab. I want to call your attention to hand-selected resources by each of our expert presenters, so make sure that you check those resources out. Some of them are links that will take you to landing pages for more information. Others are solution briefs or ebooks that you can download for additional information. So I encourage you to do that now, because those won't be as readily available after the event ends today. And then social. We want this to be a social event. You can tweet directly there from the bottom of your console using that Twitter icon. The hashtag for today, ATM EcoCash, will be automatically appended, and I'll be monitoring Twitter throughout the event. So we appreciate your participation in advance in socializing the good things that you learn here on the EcoCast. And then it looks like I forgot something there on the list, prizes. We do have some awesome prizes. We have 3 Amazon $500 gift cards to give out live on the event. You must be, of course, present during the prize drawings to qualify for those, and also meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions that you can find there in the Handouts tab. I'll be announcing the winners verbally during the event periodically, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. In addition to those 3 Amazon $500 gift cards, we also have 6 Amazon $50 gift cards that go towards our Best Question prizes, one for each of the 6 sessions on the EcoCast today. Of course, you have to ask a question to be entered into that drawing and also meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms. So one more thing to know about winning prizes: all prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and we will reach out to prize winners via email after the event. All prize winners have the option to make a donation to selected charities. The charities you see there on the screen, we've donated thousands of dollars to charity over the years. So if you win a prize and you say, hey, I'd like to just help someone less fortunate than I am, we would love to help you do that. You can follow Actual Tech Media over on Twitter. We are at Actual Tech Media. You can follow me as well, David M. Davis. And again, the hashtag for the event today is ATM EcoCast. I encourage you to subscribe to all the Actual Tech Media social channels, YouTube, Facebook, and the 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes store. And of course, we post all of our latest and greatest content on LinkedIn. You can find social icons on the top right-hand side there of your audience console. I encourage you to follow us to keep up to date on what's going on in the world of enterprise tech. I also want to point out there's a link there in the Handouts tab to the gorilla.guide website. You can download free, easy-to-read enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts at the gorilla.guide website. They're all completely free. There's probably about 100 ebooks there that you can download. No need to go buy, enterprise IT books anymore. Why would you do that when they're all free here at the Gorilla Guide Book Club? So I encourage you to check that out. Also, check out our Refer a Friend link. It's right there in the Handouts tab as well. We promise not to spam your friends and IT coworkers, but if you want to invite them to upcoming events, let them know about these cool EcoCast and MegaCast events. We would love to send them an invitation. So after the event, you'll be automatically sent to our Refer a Friend page, and it looks like this. And again, we promise not to spam them. We'll send them an invite. If they don't respond, a week later, we'll send them one more and say, hey, don't forget about the EcoCast and MegaCast. And if they don't respond, then no worries. We just want to send them to, or invite them to, an upcoming event. So with that in mind, before we kick off today's first presentation on the EcoCast, I want to talk for a moment about the modern application challenges that I know many of you are facing out there in the world of IT. I was an IT manager myself. I've dealt with legacy applications. It's not fun. And, I think it's a good time now to just take a moment and think about how prepared are you? How prepared is your infrastructure and your applications for the future of the business? Do you feel like you've got everything in place you need? I haven't talked to many IT folks who have the modern applications, the modern infrastructures, the right people, and the right amount of budget. Rarely do those things all ever, come together at once. But I think it's a good time to just take a moment and think about that, because that is the topic for today. I know many of you out there are faced with a legacy application and infrastructure stack that, has kind of questionable reliability. It kind of looks like the flowchart diagram there on the back of this slide, where there's just so many different pieces. It's just so complex. You can't even begin to train people, new employees on it, because it's just kind of overwhelmingly complex. And it's been built like spaghetti over time, connected, and it's a kind of a house of cards. So it can be unreliable, overly complex, and in most cases, it's just simply outdated and not necessary really anymore. We've got modern software, modern hardware, modern solutions in the cloud to make things much more easier. But really the requirements for this kind of modern application and infrastructure stack, there are multiple. And so let's talk about those for a moment. We need highly available, highly resilient solutions. Our end users, our clients, our customers, they expect our applications, whatever it might be. Could be an e-commerce site, could be a point of sale system, could be our company's online ordering website, a partner website, whatever it is. They expect those to be up and running 24/7, no downtime. There's no real maintenance windows that the people are happy about anymore. They expect super strong security. We can't have security breaches. We'll be in the news. We could get hit with ransomware, data exfiltration, company data being sold on the black market kind of thing. We don't want to get into that. So we need super strong security. We need data protection and disaster recovery as our last line of defense. And it needs to be able to rapidly restore our data in the event of a mass restore. If the entire data center is lost, or there's a large-scale ransomware infection, we need to be able to get all of the data back, almost immediately. And we also need strong storage performance and capacity. Data sets never seem to shrink. They continue to grow forever. And our storage needs to be able to support that. So, keep that in mind, and not just support the capacity, but also support the performance, the I/O requirements of today's modern applications. More and more, it's got to be affordable. We're continually forced to do more with less, as that kind of awful saying goes. So it's got to be cost effective, and it really needs to be pay as you go, if you will, more of an OpEx model than the traditional CapEx model. We need modern architectures and designs. We need to be able to bring up new applications, create new applications as the company demands. We can't wait, many months or a year for new applications to come up. And then we need insight into everything that's going on. We need monitoring, we need analytics, we need logging, and we need intelligent, visibility into everything that's happening with our applications and with our data. And those are all kind of high bars to set, but I believe that the solutions that you'll learn about on today's EcoCast will help to fulfill these requirements. And so now I want to ask a poll question of you out there in the audience. I want to hear, what your greatest application modernization challenges are. Many of the things I just listed are on this list, and this is a multi-select question. I will share the results of this poll with you, and you can kind of see how you stack up with your peers. So I know we took a moment to think about our application challenges for the future if we're ready to meet the needs of the business. And, now's the chance to, kind of list out what the holes were in that future that you envisioned. So I'll give everyone a moment to answer this. If you don't see all the answers, there are many. You can just scroll down in that slides window, take your mouse or your scroller or your two fingers on your trackpad on a Mac and scroll down and see all the different options that are on that poll question. And I know there are multiple, so I'll give you a moment to respond to all of those. All right, I like this feedback. Randall said their greatest modernization issue is that issue we have is the manpower to implement. So they need the staff to get things done. That's a great point. And hopefully some of these solutions will require less manpower than in the past. But great point. And we'll have to add that to the poll for next time. Another feedback here, Jonathan said we have the mandate. We have data that is mandated to be retained, and it's viewed too risky to attempt porting it out of our old AS400, yet we're building an agile front end. Challenge is that the back end doesn't or can't scale. Great feedback. Thank you, Jonathan. Let's see. Justin said the Gorilla Guides are very helpful. Thank you for that feedback. Love to hear that. All right. Thank you to everyone who responded there to the poll. Let me share the results of this with you. And it looks like 56% said security concerns, which is very telling. I mean, out of so many different options there on the list, by far the greatest single concern is around security, followed by outdated legacy applications and data protection, disaster recovery, affordability, followed by cloud and overly complex architectures. That's roughly how it breaks down. So thank you everyone for sharing those concerns. Hopefully the solutions on the event today will help to address many of those. Second poll question here, I'm about to introduce the first presenter. The poll question on the screen is, what's your time frame? Basically, what's your time frame to get something done for adding new solutions like you'll learn about on the event today, or updating your existing solutions to help modernize your company's applications? All right, thank you to everyone who responded to that poll. We do appreciate your feedback. And with that, it's time to kick off today's EcoCast with our first expert presenter. Welcome, Mr. Andy Gower, Solutions Marketing Manager at Pure Storage. Andy, take it away.
Thanks, David, for that introduction. And I'm excited to be here today. Nice to meet you all. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. My name is Andy Gower. I'm a Solutions Marketing Manager here at Portworx by Pure Storage. And today I'm going to talk about cloud-native data services for any cloud. And what that really means is, how are we at Portworx thinking about addressing these challenges that are coming up from cloud native, from Kubernetes, from containers, and thinking about addressing those in the storage and data services realm. Roadmap for today's session, I'm going to talk about our perspective on the industry, what's really driving change, what that change looks like and what are the challenges enterprises are facing. Then I'm going to talk about what we're doing here at Pure to address those challenges. And then I'm going to end talking a little bit about Portworx and how you can get started and interact with us going forward. So I like to start all of my conversations with data. Data is really the thing that's powering tomorrow's business. And what we know is that the last 18 months with COVID have really accelerated that. We've seen businesses go from analog businesses that are conducting storefronts that have activities person to person, really moving to a digital business platform where they need apps and data to provide value to customers on the spot. And those that are accelerating in this transformation are finding success, are able to thrive in this new environment. And those that can't harness the data, that can't take advantage of that data, are falling behind. So what we see is that these leading businesses are adopting a new stack to address this data. They're using the new cloud native stack to process data, to derive value and insights. And that stack really starts at the bottom. It's a stack that's built on a multi-cloud infrastructure. People are using multiple clouds, they're using on-prem and the public cloud. They're bursting to the public cloud when it makes sense. They're bringing things back on-prem because of data regulations or other regulations. And on top of that, they're using app-driven automation. They're using Kubernetes and containers to help automate this mobility, to help automate the applications, to help automate everything about these digital insights. And on top of that, they're using a whole new set of highly specialized, often open source databases like Cassandra, Kafka, Elasticsearch, and all of that is driving a fundamental change in the way we process and the people who are working on this cloud native stack. So we're seeing the emergence of things like DevOps, things like GitOps, data pipelines, the emergence of the SRE. All of this is driving to a brand new stack that's fundamentally changing how businesses are operating. And what we know is that containers and Kubernetes are at the heart of that. So some of the research we've done, 95% of new apps are developed in containers from 451. 78% of CNCF members are using Kubernetes in production. 81% of enterprises are working with 2 or more public cloud providers. And 85% of global businesses will be running containers in production by 2025. So containers and Kubernetes are really leading the way of how we get from the analog world to this digital world. But as we move to this digital world, as we adopt cloud native, as we adopt containers and Kubernetes, we start to run astray a little bit when it comes to storage. So as great as container platforms are, they don't address the storage and data management requirements that companies have, at least not in a way that's automated, scalable, and turnkey. Of course, given time and resources, you can cobble anything together for a true production environment, but that's not really feasible when you've got a massive environment with multiple apps, multiple data services, multiple databases. And so at the heart of the problem is, how do I make sure that all of the things I needed in my business in the analog world are present in the digital world? How do I make sure I can easily move between clouds? How do I protect sensitive user data? How do I deliver performance within the strict SLAs that exist? How do I have cross AZDR for mission critical applications? There's a whole host of challenges, and the fragmented storage services that exist today to support them just aren't good enough for mission critical production applications. And when we think about why this is, it comes back to the way the world has shifted with Kubernetes. So in the legacy world, everything was infrastructure centric. We think about the concept of storage wired to a server, apps living forever, provisioning the server and the storage, monitoring the server and the storage, backing up the server and the storage. Everything is centric to the server and the storage. But in the Kubernetes world, the app is king. The app's been abstracted from the infrastructure. It's fully automated. It comes and goes. We see people spin up an app. We see them provision the app, observe the app, and then they kill the app, or they provision it somewhere else, or it moves constantly depending on the day of the week. All of these come first and the infrastructure follows. And so using that infrastructure-centric approach doesn't quite work in the app-centric world that Kubernetes drives. And when we think about that a little more deeply and kind of drill into legacy storage, it really just wasn't built for this dynamic world. So when we think about scalability, a typical legacy array was maybe scaling to hundreds or thousands of volumes, whereas a container system might have 100,000 containers in it, each with their own volumes. When we think about human versus machine administration, a traditional legacy array, you've got one very highly specialized individual, maybe a couple specialized individuals who are dealing with 10 to 12 tasks a day, highly specialized. The app isn't moving, so they're really focused on those type and clicking commands. When we think about a container world, we have hundreds of API calls a second. So how does a human process hundreds of API calls a second? How do they manage 100,000 volumes with a tool set that was built for tens of volumes in 10 to 12 actions a day? And last but not least, a traditional array is going to keep your data in place. It's going to keep those services locked to the infrastructure. But we know in this new modern world, it's all about portability. It's all about mobility. It's all about wanting to move and migrate my application from on-prem to a different data center, to a different cloud, and being able to do that quickly and easily. So we need our storage. We need a software-defined storage strategy that lets us move the infrastructure and move the data with our application, so it can be constantly mobile and it can migrate as we see fit. And so that's what really drives the concept of what we're building here at Pure, what we're building here with Portworx. We said, how do we deliver a Kubernetes storage services as software that can run on any infrastructure? And how do we make sure it has a few key elements? How do we make sure we're abstracting the storage services from the infrastructure so that the storage will travel with the application? How do we make sure that any app of any size can be optimized and supported anywhere? Doesn't matter what the underlying infrastructure is. Doesn't matter if we're using AWS or Google or Azure, we can support it. How do we make sure we have a container native storage option that can support the dynamism of Kubernetes, the tens of thousands of volumes, the hundreds of storage operations a second? And how do we build something that is reliable for persistent applications, that can fail over between availability zones, that has global reliability, that has high availability, that meets those key requirements for production grade deployments on Kubernetes? And so as we thought about designing this, as we thought about our approach to this, you kind of start to see two different models that have come to light in the industry today. On the left, you see the connector approach. So using CSI, driving CSI, we've seen a number of innovations around how we use a connector CSI to connect the application layer down to the underlying storage array. And that kind of works. It lets us have a little bit of capabilities with our storage into our containers. But there are some limitations. So the storage array is managed independently from Kubernetes. The innovation is limited to the features that are supported by the open CSI spec. The storage array may be challenged by how many volumes it can support, how many connections it can support, how many changes that can be made a day. And you're really dependent on the underlying array to determine what your container capabilities are. On the right, we have the container native storage approach. So in this approach, we're taking the storage and actually putting it inside the container, running it inside Kubernetes, running it within the application, having it move with the application. And it allows us to do many thousands to one container to volume mapping. It lets us scale to 10,000 operations plus a day and make sure things are consistent as we move across any infrastructure. So supporting the storage array, the local SSDs, the cloud storage, there's a consistency as we put that pool together. And it has the storage encapsulated in a container native virtual volume that is free to move with the container and not locked into the underlying infrastructure. And most importantly, it's managed as part of the native Kubernetes. So we're extending the automation of Kubernetes down into the storage and data management, and it allows us to benefit from that automation of Kubernetes rather than simply have to manage things separately and line things up separately ourselves. So taking all of that, we here at Pure acquired Portworx back in September to really address this. So Portworx is a software-defined storage layer that is built to run across any infrastructure, any cloud, supporting any Kubernetes distribution, and provide support for any application on top. Whether it's multiple databases, things like Kafka, Elasticsearch, Cassandra, we can support any application, and we can support it throughout the life cycle of the application. So from the time you conceive it, when it's in its pilot phase, to dev test, to production, to worldwide scalability, you can use the Portworx platform to support the entirety of that application lifecycle from end to end. And what you see on the screen here is how we came and approached this. So on the bottom, you can see that we can support those multiple infrastructures, including FlashArray and FlashBlade. We virtualize those volumes And by virtualizing those volumes, we're able to provide app-consistent, container-native, universal storage services across the shared pool. So we can do snapshots, we can do replication, we can do encryption, we can do migration and DR, and we can do that all flexibly and easily from the Portworx console, the Portworx PX Central console. In terms of what those capabilities actually look like, we really focus on 6 key modules to deliver the business requirements you need to run apps in production at scale. The first is PX Store. So PX Store is focused on providing a scalable, persistent storage volume that can support hybrid multi-cloud deployments for your application. PX Store is the foundation of our container native storage layer, and it provides that opening for you to have storage that's scalable and run anywhere. The next is PX Migrate. PX Migrate is focused on supporting simple and easy migrations between multiple locations, whether it's different data centers, whether it's on-prem to a public cloud, whether it is an upgrade scenario where you're moving from a specific version of Kubernetes to another version of Kubernetes and you need to migrate from one to the other. Whatever the use case is, PX Migrate makes it simple and easy to capture all of your application data, all the Kubernetes objects, and migrate them from one to another. With PXDR, we're able to support disaster recovery across multiple availability zones. Within an availability zone, we can provide 0 RPO within a metro area, and we can provide continuous backups for expanded availability across the wide area network. And this is a particularly important one. A lot of customers come in and say, the platform is great, the container orchestration platform is great, but DR is critical for me to go into production, and PXDR is what lets us support a deployment in production with full DR capabilities. PX Secure, of course, security is a very hot topic today. Things like ransomware, how do we make sure that our data is always secure? With PX Secure, we support BYO encryption. We support role-based access control, and we're able to make sure that the data is safe and secure. Unauthorized users can't access it, and we can protect your Kubernetes deployment and the data underneath it. PX Autopilot is focused on how do we make sure that we aren't over provisioning cloud volumes? How do we make sure that when we're using a public cloud vendor, rather than buy 100 terabytes at the front and have to pay for all of it when we're only using 50 terabytes, we can actually start with a 50 terabyte deployment and set some rules so we auto scale as the application grows. And with that, we can cut costs tremendously from our cloud spend. And the last is PX Backup, which is both part of our core platform and also a standalone product. And like the rest of Portworx, PX Backup was built from the ground up to support containers and Kubernetes. It is aimed at providing backup for applications running across any Kubernetes distribution and focused on backing up the entire application, both at a container granular level and with full application awareness, and snapshotting things like not only the Kubernetes application itself, but also the Kubernetes objects and all the data associated with the application. So we make it simple and easy for you to back up an application, restore it somewhere else, and be able to get that done seamlessly with all the details you need. And so this is the full stack. This is what Kubernetes Data Services Platform brings to the table. And as I mentioned, we support this unified single platform across any Kubernetes distribution, any app, any cloud, any infrastructure, and at every stage of the journey. Now, if you're just learning about us, we are the leader in the space. We've been recognized by GigaOM. This is a survey that came out a couple of weeks ago, both on the cloud native data storage analysis and enterprise Kubernetes storage analysis. Portworx and Pure Storage, which you can see highlighted on the screen, were both named as leaders in the space, and Portworx was described as setting the gold standard for Kubernetes storage. So we have been in this space. We've gotten a lot of traction in this space. We've had a lot of success with customers in this space. And Portworx, as I said, we have a lot of success in the space. We are one of the most widely used Kubernetes data services platform. Our customers are some of the largest, most sophisticated users of Kubernetes in the world. And the reason I say that is because if you have a challenge or problem, we've already solved it for another customer. And we can use that expertise and insights on your situation, on your deployment, on your specific journey to help you along and make sure that we are addressing the challenges that you have. And on the right, you see that we have partnered very closely with a number of leading container orchestration platforms. So we work very closely with IBM, with VMware and Tanzu, with Red Hat OpenShift, with Amazon, with Google, with Azure, with Rancher. So we have spent a lot of time making sure that the Portworx platform is fully supported, fully integrated, fully invested in the success of the container market as a whole. And the last thing I want to talk about before we wrap up here is, a couple of places where we've had success really taking Portworx. And I want to walk you through what their stories look like with our customers and what we've been able to do in the field. So the first is T-Mobile. T-Mobile is a very interesting case and really focused on speed. So T-Mobile faces a challenge every few months when Apple or Samsung rolls out a new iPhone or rolls out a new Samsung device. And as you can expect, as soon as that device is rolled up, T-Mobile sees a huge spike in traffic. They see a huge surge in their website. And they're having challenges dealing with that scale, dealing with that sudden surge in traffic and interest. And so working with us, we're able to provide them the storage backend, the data services backend to make that happen to be effective in their scalability during those surges. But importantly, we also worked with them to help reduce their application delivery lead time. So when they started the journey with us, it took them 6 months and 37 steps to deliver an application, which doesn't really work when you've got a new announcement from Apple or a new announcement from Samsung or a new idea from marketing. It doesn't really work to have that kind of lead time. We're able to reduce their lead time down to hours. So someone like Apple can announce a new product in the morning. T-Mobile can come up with a new marketing campaign and roll out a new app to support that on the same day. And it's hard to underestimate the value of that to a business. So that speed was a big one. Agility, Roblox is another interesting one. So Roblox is a gaming company that has about 70 million gamers worldwide. And last year at the beginning of the pandemic, back in March 2020, they scaled as much in 1 week as they did in the entire previous year combined. So in 1 week, they saw a generational shift in demand for their product. How do you deal with that if you don't have the right storage in the back end that can handle that scale, that can handle that growth? With Portworx, Roblox is able to easily handle that growth. They're able to scale and support that influx of new gamers on the platform and have continued to be able to do that since. RBC is another very interesting one. So RBC was going down a Kubernetes journey, and they reached a point where they said, we have this very important banking app that we want to move into Kubernetes. We want all the benefits of Kubernetes, but we don't want to put that banking app on yet because there are some business requirements around DR that we just can't meet with our underlying Kubernetes platform. And so they came to us and we said, hey, let's work with you to build a zero RPO failover, a zero RPO scenario where you can sustain a complete data center failure without any data loss. And we're able to do that with them. So they have 2 completely independent data centers, zero RPO failover, a very fast RTO, and it gave them the confidence in putting that banking app into production on Kubernetes and ensuring it had the reliability it needed. And last but not least is Audi Business Innovation. So Audi Business Innovation came into the container journey looking for speed, agility, and reliability. And of course, they were able to gain all that. But importantly, they were also able to gain cost savings. So they were using AWS, and with Portworx, with our PX Autopilot that I mentioned earlier, they were able to cut their bill by 60% using PX Autopilot on AWS. So not only did they gain the benefit of speed and agility and reliability, they saved a tremendous amount of money in the process. So those are just 4 very interesting examples of where we've been able to help accelerate digital transformation by adding Portworx as kind of that last piece of the puzzle to your container story, to your Kubernetes environment, and helping you really take those apps into production at scale. So with that, I hope I've piqued your interest in Portworx by Pure Storage. We've got a few different ways that you can get started today. We've got a Portworx Essentials free forever version. We've got a Portworx Enterprise free 30-day trial. And we also have a PX backup specific 30-day trial. So wherever you are in your journey, please visit our website. Please check out our free trials, and be happy to take some questions from you.
All right. Thanks so much for that really cool presentation on Portworx, Andy. I do appreciate that. I know the audience does as well. I'm fascinated by what you all are doing there at Pure Storage with Portworx. We do have some questions for you. You ready for some questions from the audience, Andy?
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. I want to call everyone's attention before we start Q&A to the poll I just brought up on the screen. This just says, what additional information would you like about the Pure Storage solution? Specifically here, we're talking about Portworx. So I know you started answering some of the questions out there in the Q&A. I appreciate that. Let's see. This one they're asking about is, Simon wants to know, does Portworx have any sort of dashboard feature or policy engine that allows users to search and display the mapping related to compliance?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do have a dashboard. We have a console called PX Central. It's kind of the center point of everything we do. And from there, you can see the topology. You can see where policies have been implemented, where other features from a security perspective are in place. It's also where you can back up and restore the application. So we do have that GUI, and we also do have it available via CLI as well. But yeah, PX Central is our primary GUI.
Excellent. There's another question here about Portworx and security. Can Portworx help to ensure there's no data breaches across when traffic is traversing across multiple clouds?
Yeah, so again, another great question. So Portworx, we do two things for security that I mentioned on the presentation. We do support bring your own encryption, which of course relies on either the underlying array or the cloud encryption or the BIO that you're bringing to the table. So we're not providing our own. We're allowing you to bring your own. And then we provide role-based access control to manage the access to your data. But we do rely on the underlying. We do have some additional security features I didn't touch on around tokens and identity management. We do, for example, fully support both IBM Key and AWS identity management. So we plug into those public cloud security protocols, but we have you bring it to the table for Portworx.
Excellent. Let's see. Bradford's asking, did I hear that Portworx does not require CSI drivers to configure storage capacity on external on-prem arrays?
That's correct. So we do provide a CSI driver, but Portworx can be used with or without it. We typically use Stork, and our own architecture offers a lot more features than CSI. And that was the point I was trying to get across in our presentation, which is there is a CSI spec, and we can support that, but CSI has some limitations today. And so what we do with our own technology goes above and beyond what CSI is able to do today. So if you want to do CSI, yes, we support it, but we recommend going down the pathway of what we have in our architecture, what we have in our stack.
Got it. Okay. And then I'd like this kind of a basic basic question here is they say I'm running Kubernetes in the cloud. Why would I need Portworx?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We have a lot of customers who are running in the cloud on top of EBS, on top of Google Persistent Disk. Portworx is 100% software layer, so it runs on top of that cloud storage. And it's able to provide those key Kubernetes features that the underlying cloud storage isn't able to provide. So Kubernetes level HA, data protection, security of the container itself, container granular access, migration, capacity management. So all these things you need for a robust deployment, we're able to provide that, and that doesn't come natively from those cloud providers. So you can run Portworx on top. If you're using multiple clouds, you have a consistent layer across those multiple clouds, but we kind of provide that last mile to have a successful deployment in a public cloud with Kubernetes.
Very nice. Let's see, this person says we don't run our data services on Kubernetes itself. How can Portworx help me?
Yeah, another great question. So it's something we hear a lot of customers, and we see a lot of customers say, hey, I'm not doing my data services on Kubernetes today. Where is the role for Portworx in this? And what I'll say is, as you ramp up Kubernetes, you quickly find that trying to manage data services that are not on Kubernetes is just a challenge. You're not going to get the full value of moving that application onto Kubernetes without the data service moving along with it. And once you do that, you introduce a whole set of challenges that we talked about in the presentation. So you get the benefit of the automation with Kubernetes. You have some challenges with putting it in production. And that's where Portworx can come help to make sure that that move of data services onto Kubernetes is seamless and your app is up and running without issue.
Excellent. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for our live Q&A. One of the things you mentioned, though, piqued my interest. You talked about there's a free forever version of Portworx, and then there's a 30-day trial. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We've got a free forever. We've got a 30-day trial of the full Portworx Enterprise experience, and we also have a 30-day trial of just the PX backup experience. So please, check it out on the handout that you have. There's a link, portworx.com/free-trial, and all three of those you can find all three of those at that link.
Excellent. All right. Well, Andy, there's some more technical questions there for you in the electronic queue. Again, great presentation. Thanks so much for being on the EcoCast today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And thanks to Pure Storage for supporting the event. Don't forget about the handout tab right there. And as Andy mentioned, there's a link in there to find out more information and sign up for this the 30-day trial, as well as the free forever different versions of Portworx. So make sure that you check those out there in the handouts tab. All right, and with that, it's time now to move on to our next presentation on the EcoCast. I'm excited to introduce Sean Roth, Director of Product Marketing at Nutanix, and Wayne Patton, Sales Engineer at Souza. Sean and Wayne, take it away.
Thank you so much. My name is Sean Roth. I'm the Director of Product Marketing for Virtual and Cloud Native Compute at Nutanix. And I'm going to jump right into my material here. We're going to take a step back and just look at what's involved in going cloud native. Obviously, this is a huge trend and a whole different way to approach building software applications for the cloud. Now, of course, you along with many organizations are looking at how best to approach this. How do I harness the power of Kubernetes and build containerized applications based on microservices architectures? Where's a good place to start? And as you're going to see through the material here, having a Kubernetes platform that enables simple automated management across the entire lifecycle is really key. And one of the reasons for that is that if you look at Kubernetes as a platform and how it evolves year over year, for example, there are probably about 4 major releases per year at this point, and the ecosystem is also growing very fast. There are a ton of different companion technologies that you would want to look to as you build your Kubernetes stack on-prem. And so all of that evolves quickly, and it's really tough to keep current with what's out there and available. Also complicating things is the fact that legacy infrastructure doesn't really cut it in terms of the way Kubernetes leverages compute, storage, and networking resources. So right off the bat, you're looking at a whole different approach that's required in getting resources allocated and used by applications, obviously by the developers that are building them. So expertise is in short supply. This is a relatively young new world, and you need all the help you can get. Kubernetes as a platform is very distributed and complex. It's got many distinct components. You can see here through the simplified diagram on the right what's involved. And each of those components really requires a lot of detailed configuration in the beginning to get up and running. So the challenges that operators are likely to grapple with as they seek to deploy Kubernetes on-prem are things like version upgrades, or how do you upgrade the OS on nodes in your cluster. These things may seem straightforward, but they do involve a lot of small manual steps if you do them without any kind of automated flow. Configuring persistent storage is another huge challenge, as now the majority of containerized applications are stateful versus stateless when this approach was a little younger. Networking, again, you may be looking at a different approach to networking all of your Kubernetes pods. And then how do you create a highly available configuration for certain components, like for example, for etcd or for your master nodes in Kubernetes. Security is always a top challenge here. And so, given how Kubernetes uses resources differently than do, more traditional environments, then, you will have to look at a different approach to security, not only for your Kubernetes clusters, of course, but for your containers. And then monitoring observability throughout the stack. That's something that is really critical and requires a lot of time and effort to figure out. So having a Kubernetes management solution here is really critical, because you can bring in something that has a variety of features that serve not only the operators of the infrastructure, but developers who are building the applications on top of it. Some guidance here that I would suggest is looking at a CNCF certified Kubernetes distribution. So conformance is a great attribute, because that means that interoperability is going to be a lot higher, especially in an open source ecosystem. Giving your users a native experience where you have, little to no proprietary elements that would lock you into that platform. You want to be able to be flexible and maintain portability of your applications across different Kubernetes environments. And automating all of the typically manual tasks around Kubernetes lifecycle management is going to be really key as well. You definitely don't want to spend your time doing these painstaking, cluster node upgrades or Kubernetes version upgrades. And then when it comes time to really making available resources that your developers are going to need, you want to be able to integrate your preferred storage solutions. You want to be able to easily approach networking, security, and monitoring, and incorporating those solutions into your stack. So what I'm going to present here really is Nutanix's approach to a cloud native stack on-prem. You can see here that Rancher, as a full-featured Kubernetes management platform, runs extremely well on top of Nutanix HCI. For those of you who aren't familiar with Nutanix, we pioneered hyper-converged infrastructure, and we aim to make infrastructure essentially invisible. And by that means, having a platform that is not only easy to manage, but also operates and behaves in a way that is advantageous for Kubernetes in the way that Kubernetes needs to scale, and integrate, critical components like storage solution, having a networking framework and so forth. We give you all that, and you can build all of that on top of Nutanix HCI here. So one of the things that made Nutanix, a leader in this space is how we've kind of simplified all of these technologies, making them work together well, making them very easy to manage. And again, when it comes to Kubernetes and cloud native workloads, you need as much intelligent automation and simplicity as you can get, especially at the infrastructure level. And what that's going to do ultimately is accelerate your application development. So developers are constantly in need of storage or networking, and just have the resources that their applications will need. So as an operator, Nutanix is a platform that will allow you to easily give your developers what they need. And that's certainly true of Rancher as we get more into what Rancher can do for you as you roll out your cloud native applications. So with that, my part here is done. We're gonna have another segment that's gonna take a deep dive into what Rancher is all about, and we're gonna have a great demo given to you here by Wayne Patton. Wayne?
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Wayne Patton. I'm a sales engineer with Souza, and today I'm going to talk to you a bit about Rancher. So for those of you that may not know, I assume most people do, is that Souza is an open source company that's been around for well over 25 years. You've probably heard of Souza Linux Enterprise Server, or SLES, and we're obviously the company that's behind that. And now Rancher, as of the acquisition of last year, and other open source solutions that you can go to souza.com and explore for yourself. I don't have time to do that today. We're a part of a lot of industry initiatives and associations that are listed here on this slide. We work with a lot of the largest companies in the world, as listed also, and then of course have partnerships with many different hardware and other software providers. So our approach to managing, or Rancher's approach to managing clusters. So it's a multi-cluster world. In other words, most companies are going to have several Kubernetes clusters. I spoke to a company not long ago and they had well over 4,000 Kubernetes clusters, and they need to manage all those. So it's a multi-cluster world. Most people are not going to live with just one. Our goal is to treat all Kubernetes distributions as first-class citizens. We mentioned CNCF certified Kubernetes distributions, and that's the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And as long as the Kubernetes distribution is CNCF certified, it can be managed by Rancher. And that gives us, going to the last bullet here, an open approach to open source, right? So we're not going to shoebox you into a certain Kubernetes distribution, but we're also going to be able to manage other Kubernetes distributions. Now, the value that we're going to bring, to back up to the third bullet here, is that we're going to be able to provide Kubernetes management. You're going to need to manage those distributions or those Kubernetes clusters. You need to control access, roles, responsibilities, who can put applications where, security policies. All these things need to be managed on these clusters, and Rancher is here to help you do that. So this is going to allow us to enable a Kubernetes everywhere type of approach, starting with a enterprise grade Linux distribution at the bottom. For your data centers, we have RKE, which is the Rancher Kubernetes engine. It is upstream Kubernetes, been repackaged into containers, so we can either run it on Docker or something like Containerd, or RKE is actually Docker. And we don't do a lot of proprietary things to it. It is upstream Kubernetes. We will work with Amazon EKS, Azure AKS, and Google GKE. In other words, most of the major cloud providers. If you've got a cluster in that ecosystem, we can manage that as well. And then, of course, K3S, which is a single binary Kubernetes distribution that is perfect for things like developers' laptops, branch servers, and things out on the edge. Anywhere where you need a very small, lightweight Kubernetes distribution. It's boiled down to about a 250 megabyte binary. And again, it's very small, very agile. And it is a CNCF certified Kubernetes distribution. We can use Rancher to manage all of these different distributions of Kubernetes and add day two operations to allow you to better utilize your clusters. Things like Longhorn storage for block storage on your Kubernetes clusters, Istio. And then this is going to allow you to have production ready platforms and capabilities for your containerized applications. So putting this all together, your IT operations folks can offer Kubernetes platforms or things like cluster as a service or namespace as a service. They can apply access and security policies. And then your DevOps people can do advanced capabilities, things like continuous delivery, different types of deployments, doing canary, blue-green type deployments, automate your DNS and load balancing, and many other things. And both of these organizations or groups of people are going to be able to utilize shared resources, Fluentd, logging, app packaging, monitoring, alerting, and various other things that we have listed here. So this is going to allow your organization to put it all together and run an enterprise-grade Kubernetes platform for your applications. So let's take a look at Rancher itself and go through a demo here. All right, what I have here is a Rancher management platform that's been built to manage some Kubernetes environments in our Nutanix lab that we're using here. Things that I'm going to show you are going to be wrapped around managing Kubernetes anywhere or everywhere, some ease of use functionality, integrated tooling for day two functionality, security, and application management. Rancher is an API first product. In other words, everything I'm going to show you here in the web interface can be done through an API, through scripts or programs that you write to go ahead and automate these features. This is version 2.5.8. Version 2.6 of Rancher is going to be out shortly. What I have here is Rancher, and I have 3 clusters in my Rancher environment. I've got a local cluster that Rancher was installed on. I've got a K3S cluster running in the Nutanix laboratory. And I've got a Raspberry Pi 4 K3s cluster that's actually sitting behind me on a shelf. So this just shows that we can manage Kubernetes in lots of different places. Now, how do I install, or how did I get here? To install Rancher, it's very, very simple. We need an existing Kubernetes cluster that can be anywhere. And then it's just simply a Helm chart install that installs Rancher on top of your Kubernetes cluster. And that actually is the local cluster that I have listed here as the first cluster. It's the cluster that Rancher is running on. And we can zoom in there and we can see that there's some cluster information, and then there's some node information about the 3 nodes that I have as part of that cluster. And then from there, I can either deploy clusters or add existing or import existing clusters. To add a cluster to Rancher, it's relatively easy. And I've got 4 sections here. I can register an existing Kubernetes cluster. They can be an Amazon EKS, Google GKE, or other. I can use existing nodes, and this is what we're going to go execute here today. And I have some VMs that are on a Nutanix solution, and we're going to go ahead and use those to deploy an RKE cluster too. So this is the Nutanix Lab #1 cluster. And as I walk down through the form here, I can change various things. I'm going to skip over some of this. The things that show up in the web interface are actually the most common things that you would want to specify for a Kubernetes cluster. I can select the Kubernetes version, and here we support the 4 latest releases, and I'm going to go ahead and choose 1.19. If you want, there's a network provider. We have 4 here, and I'm going to go ahead and leave it on the default, which is Canal. If you want something other than what's listed here, we can click on this Edit as a YAML button, and if I do that, I will get a YAML editor with all the cluster definition YAML files, and you can edit that until your heart's content, and you can put or specify whatever network provider you want to. If I need a cloud provider, which in this case is I don't, I can add things like private registry, authorized endpoints, and other advanced options, but we're going to bypass that today and go on to the next screen. Now here, I can choose what role I want my nodes to take. Do I want them to be an etcd node, a control plane node, or a worker node? And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just choose all 3 roles for all 3 nodes that we're going to deploy. So I'm going to copy this Docker command to a clipboard. And here I've got 3 nodes that have Docker running, and I'm just going to go paste and execute that command here on all 3 nodes. Then I'm going to click done, and you'll see I have my Nutanix Lab 1 cluster, and then it's in a state of provisioning. Now this is going to take a few minutes, and while this is provisioning, I'm going to go on and show you some other things. Back to the add cluster screen. So we just used the existing nodes option. I can also in Rancher interact with infrastructure providers like Amazon and Azure, DigitalOcean, and others. And Rancher can actually spin up the infrastructure. Or the last section here, I can use a hosted Kubernetes provider, and I can spin up clusters in the hosted Kubernetes providers from companies that do that service. Okay, let's talk a minute about security. So for security, I want to be able to control authentication to Rancher. And for authentication, we can have local accounts with Rancher, or we can use Active Directory or any of the GitHub or any of these other authentication providers. And Rancher will take advantage of the user and group information for all of these providers. Also under security, or let me back up here just a second. Rancher has 3 different contexts. And there's a global context, which is my Rancher installation or my Rancher environment. There's a cluster context, which I can go see information about particular clusters, things like nodes, storage, projects, namespaces, or general cluster information. And then there's also what we call a project context. And in this particular case, a project is just a logical grouping or a logical collection of namespaces. And if I had deployments in this Pi 4 default namespace or project, you would see those listed here. Now, those contexts become quite important with security, because as I add users, I can specify roles for those users for all these different contexts. So if I have a user and I want them to be a Rancher admin to my Rancher interface or my Rancher management platform, then I can provide them an admin role. Create clusters, they can manage authentication, manage cluster drivers, node drivers, roles, settings. In other words, these are all things that are inherent to the Rancher platform. I can also define roles for clusters, cluster members, cluster owners, create projects. And again, projects are collections of namespaces, manage nodes, and various things that are related to clusters. And then I can also assign users or groups, roles wrapped around projects or namespaces, project members, secrets, ingress controllers, config maps, things that are inherent to a Kubernetes namespace, or in this case, a Rancher project, which are pretty much similar things. Okay, and back to my global view here for a second. Okay, so now we're back to our global Rancher screen, and the Nutanix Lab 1 cluster has been deployed, and it's marked green is active here. And one of the things we're doing in future versions of Rancher is the interface is going to be changed somewhat. And I'm going to go ahead and use this Cluster Explorer from here on out. And this is similar to what the future interface is going to look like, although it might be tweaked a little bit. And here, after clicking on going into the Cluster Explorer, I see a dashboard, things like Kubernetes version, what my Kubernetes version is, it's RKE in here, information about resources, namespaces, pods use, and that sort of thing. Down on the left, as I go down here, this is the cluster dashboard. If I click on one of the items on the left-hand menu, then my view changes to correspond to what I clicked on, and here are my namespaces. As I go down here, here are the 3 nodes, the Nutanix VM nodes that I've used to build this cluster on top of. And also things like a workload overview, which since it's a brand new cluster, it's not going to have anything. So let's go ahead and deploy a small workload here. So I'm going to go on deployments. There isn't anything at the moment, but we're going to create a deployment. And the deployment, I'm just going to give it a name of demo 1. I'm going to skip down here to the container image, and I'm going to paste in the container image that I want to use. I'm going to add a port, and this is going to be a node port. I'm going to skip the name because it'll automatically generate one. It's going to be on port 8080. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit create. And so this is downloading the container, and it's going to go ahead and spin up this deployment. And you can see in this ready column right now 0 or 1 because it's updating and downloading the container. So here our deployment has been deployed. You can see it has a state of active. And notice it's got 1 container of 1 ready, and it's given me an endpoint here. And this endpoint is a link that I can click on and go ahead and go to that application. One of the things I can do is I can change the configuration of the deployment. And here I had 1 replica. I'm going to go ahead and change it to 2 replicas and hit save. And now it's adding a second container. And if I go to this endpoint, you can see now I have 2 replicas, 2 different containers running this application. So that's how simple it is from the user interface to do a deployment and roll out an application. Of course, you can open a kubectl shell here to interact with it. You can download kubeconfig files so that you can use kubectl or other tools like Helm on a workstation. So all those tools are still available for this cluster, but this just shows the ease of use for the user interface. The next thing I want to show you here is the apps and marketplace area of Rancher. And here I've got 2 different categories of things that we can roll out. These are basically Helm charts. The blue ones are things that Rancher provides and Rancher supports. Longhorn is a block storage capability that can be installed on your cluster. You can install Istio, CIS benchmark, and logging applications. Our partner Helm repositories are things that are just that, Helm repositories that are provided by partners, such as Datadog, HAProxy, Sysdig, and various other things. While Rancher doesn't directly support these things, we do make it easy for you to install these tools for your day 2 operations. And the last section here that we're going to take a look at is called continuous delivery or fleet. And this allows me to manage large scales or large numbers of clusters. So here I've got a Git repository, and a Git repository, this particular one is in GitHub, and there's an application out there. I've got a list of clusters. And again, here's the Nutanix lab cluster that we created a little bit ago. And then the K3S cluster is in my Pi cluster. And I can also define cluster groups. And here I've defined a group, their application, and it's a label of a cluster. And the label is called app, and the value for the label is demo. So I've basically assigned a label to a cluster. And that's how I define cluster groups. And any cluster that has that particular label will be part of this group. And I can create as many different groups as I want. If I want to roll out this application, then I can edit its configuration. And here I've got, you can see the GitHub repository that I'm using, the path inside that repository, and then where I want to deploy it. And I can deploy it to 0 clusters or no clusters, all clusters in my Rancher interface. I can name an individual cluster here from my drop-down list, or I can go ahead and use a cluster group that I've got defined. And let's say you're a retail environment and you have a certain type of store, and there might be 100 of those stores. And maybe so you might create a cluster group where all those stores fall into this particular group, and you could roll out an application to those 100 different clusters in just a matter of minutes. So this capability is called Fleet, and it's used to roll out applications to multiple groups of clusters, individual clusters, or large quantities of clusters. So back to my Cluster Explorer and my dashboard. And that does it for the demo today. So I'd like to thank you. If you have any questions, please submit those. And we will get back to you as soon as we possibly can. Again, my name is Wayne Patton, and I'm a sales engineer from Souza. Thank you for watching today.
All right, excellent presentation. Thank you so much, Wayne and Sean. Really cool what you guys are doing there at Nutanix and Souza. And thanks for the demo. That was cool to see it in action. I've just brought up a poll question for everyone out there. On the screen, it says, what additional information would you like? And we, of course, appreciate your participation in that. The folks at Nutanix and Souza do want your feedback. And I'm routing all these excellent electronic questions over to Wayne and Sean as well. So keep those electronic questions coming. We've run out of time for our live Q&A, but we do want your feedback on the poll. And I'll leave that poll up while I announce our first Amazon $500 gift card winner. This gift card's going to Trish Hanley from Texas. Congratulations, Trish Hanley from Texas. There's still 2 more gift cards to give out on the event, and of course our best question prizes as well, 1 for each session. And I'll let everyone respond there to the poll. Give you just a few more seconds to do that. All right, thank you for all the poll responses. Let's go ahead now and move on to our next presentation on today's EcoCast. I'm excited to introduce Mr. Craig Nunes, Chief Operating Officer at Nebulon. Craig, it's great to have you on. Let's flip on the video and take it away.
All right, hello all. Thank you for joining the webcast today. My name is Craig Nunes, and I'm co-founder and Chief Operating Officer at Nebulon. I couldn't be more excited to talk to you today about 4 design tips to deliver your organization a flexible, cost-effective infrastructure approach for modern distributed applications. I wish we were together in a room so I could get a feel for where each of you are in the journey to implementing and supporting this class of application. I'm guessing there's some real veterans out there, while others might be trying to scope out some early efforts. So wherever you're at, hopefully there's something here for you to think about. I'm sure you know that the success of your project is often guided by broader initiatives within your organization. I've talked to a lot of large orgs, large businesses, enterprises, where they're focused on enabling their application teams with a more, call it self-service approach, so they can get more done faster. Maybe that's something your organization wants to see with the shift to modern application infrastructure, more like a cloud. Others I've spoken to are trying to map out how to handle support for infrastructure assets associated with the combination of traditional applications together with modern distributed applications. Is there a way to avoid bifurcating resources, both infrastructure and people, in getting this right? Some of you are likely doing a bit of automation today. Automation of traditional infrastructure devices, you're probably aware, is typically done one device or one cluster at a time. One of our early customers showed me his old scripts, and the majority of the code consisted of a ton of conditional statements to account for different devices, different locations, different software versions, etc. So in thinking through your modern application implementation, there's a huge opportunity to simplify at scale automation. Finally, we talked to lots of folks who have an ambition to roll out modern application infrastructure, but their organization needs to see measurable cost savings versus existing infrastructure. And I'm guessing your organization's no different. I've got an interesting and maybe different tip for you here. I maintain that you can attack each one of these if you inject a cloud-like experience into your on-prem initiatives. Okay, so let's dive in. First, let me quickly introduce you to Nebulon. Some of you might not have heard of us. When we started the company back in 2018, our goal was aimed at helping IT organizations like yours deploy, manage, and maintain on-prem enterprise application data at scale as simply and rapidly as in the public cloud. Seemak Nazari is our CEO, and he said from day one that our goal is to bring the public cloud experience to your on-prem application infrastructure. Another point I'd make is my view is cloud is not a destination. It's an operating model that can exist across all your data centers, not just the public cloud ones, okay? We are a cloud-based software company delivering a new category of smart infrastructure. And smart infrastructure is all around us. Think smart home, smart car. I could go on. What these all have in common is a cloud-based control plane, so a big brain in the cloud, managing IoT endpoints in smart devices. And what you get from that are user benefits that are awesome, like easy remote management, automated software updates, simple automation, and a ton of other benefits. A good example of how smart infrastructure is, kind of progressed in the data center can be found looking on the network side. Several years back, companies like Meraki Networks, now part of Cisco, or Mist Systems, now Juniper, pioneered efforts in cloud-managed smart network infrastructure. Great examples of some progress that's been made in the data center today. So think about smart infrastructure applied to the compute storage application infrastructure in your data center. This is what we do. Nebulon Smart Infrastructure gives you the benefits of the public cloud on-prem, and we do it across both core and edge data centers. Very briefly, smart infrastructure has two parts. Part one is infrastructure software delivered as a service from our cloud called Nebulon On. And this software itself provides application infrastructure provisioning and management, and includes at its foundation enterprise class, shared and local data services. And that's important given the topic we've got here today. I'll get into why later. Part two is a PCIe offload engine called the Services Processing Unit, which is embedded in each of your application servers and controls the server's own internal SSDs, okay? You'll get a chance to learn more about our company at the end of this presentation, but for now, let's get to the 4 design tips I promised you. So tip number 1, consider how you might offer self-service infrastructure experience for your application owners and product teams. Why? Well, first of all, this approach done right is going to allow you to refine and control the recipe for modern application infrastructure while allowing for your application teams to provision what they want, when they want, improving their productivity, and by the way, yours as well. There's a few things I suggest you think about in setting up a winning approach. First, you need a service catalog with curated, reusable definitions of server storage configurations. Perhaps a generic Kubernetes environment, or maybe a MongoDB or Couchbase environment. By the way, you might also want something that allows you to set up a more traditional environment like VMware if you've got a bunch of that running as well. Now, catalog is good for kind of day zero, but once provisioned, you'll want existing infrastructure to learn from system telemetry associated with real application usage and be continuously optimized. That's also really important. Now, within the service catalog, this is where you can host your curated application templates. They provide all the necessary automation to turn bare metal servers into operational application infrastructure. For example, a given application template, things can be set up like the number and size of volumes, whether they're local to the server or shared across multiple servers, which servers have access, data redundancy, what data protection applies and on what schedule, what OS image is used for boot volumes. All of those can be cast into the application template. So when rolled out, your application owners don't have to worry about it. Done right, the result here is super fast deployment of application infrastructure by your specifications for application teams across your organization. Once servers are racked, physically connected to a network, configuration and provisioning for any application literally can be done in minutes. Okay, let's talk tip number 2. Once that infrastructure is provisioned, consider what you need to put in place to handle the ongoing care and feeding necessary, and ideally for both your traditional and modern application environments. First, consider platforms that provide you with cloud-based intelligent insights you can stay ahead of necessary operational improvements. You should expect continuous monitoring and AI-based analytics, alerts, and reports, which benefit not only from lessons learned in your own environment, but also from anonymized insights from other organizations like your own. You should also expect actionable performance and utilization recommendations, as well as the ability to initiate immediate action on predicted issues to prevent service disruption. Okay. You also want to think about how software and firmware updates are going to be handled across this infrastructure. Again, taking a page from smart infrastructure all around us, most software updates either happen transparently in the cloud or are done automatically and non-disruptively on the endpoint devices themselves. So new features made available in real time in the cloud, and then say one-click updates across your entire fleet for things like server BIOS, SSD firmware, storage data services, all done without disruption to your users, okay? Done right, this cloud-based approach to infrastructure management should help you get twice as much done in half the time, okay? Let's talk tip number 3. When it comes to ramping up your automation efforts, you'll benefit in a big way with infrastructure that takes a cloud-based API-first approach to management. Imagine simple queries to a single API in the cloud to pull stats across your entire global infrastructure. The benefit of the cloud-based approach is a common API at a single revision level in the cloud for all that infrastructure. You should expect such an approach to provide you, fully programmable endpoint in the cloud, offering comprehensive SDKs, Python, PowerShell, Ansible, Terraform, whatever you're using. And if done right, you should be able to filter by site, by geographic location, internal department, by application across geographies. Get views of small clusters of nodes or 1,000 nodes in aggregate. You will also be able to manage your fleet around the globe as easily you would managing a single node, and be able to implement at scale operational changes with super simple automation, right? Powerful, right? Now, we've been talking principally about benefits of a control plane in the cloud, big brain in the cloud. Let's pivot now to the data plane and what you might consider to enable a lot of those things we've just discussed. So tip number 4, if you were thinking about deploying a server-based approach, hyperconverged infrastructure software, software-defined storage as your underlying infrastructure or data infrastructure layer, hold that thought. I suggest you take a look at modern server-embedded approach to infrastructure software that's indeed server-based, but avoids many of the limitations you might have experienced with HCIS technologies. One important development in the industry has been ARM-based approaches have gotten really powerful, and you'd be amazed at what's now possible today. Imagine a PCIe-based endpoint. Remember, we called that an SPU in the Nebulon context. In each of your application servers with full enterprise data services. Such a thing was simply not possible just a few short years ago. And I'm sure you're aware that an SDS or HCIS approach consumes server, CPU memory, network resources to provide the necessary data services for the application workloads in a given server, right? The SPU approach moves those data services down to silicon on a PCIe card and avoids any server, CPU, memory, or network overhead. So you get the whole server for your modern application workloads by avoiding, 20-25% server resource overhead of SDS or HCIS. You can improve workload density and reduce the total number of servers you need to buy, okay? And because data services support not only shared storage for the more traditional applications, these also support local non-mirrored capacity that modern applications typically need. So you're going to spend a lot less money on SSD capacity versus any HCIS alternative out there. You also want to consider how you might leverage common infrastructure across both modern and traditional applications. The server embedded approach has a great advantage in that it can be supported with virtually any server OS or hypervisor out there. No specialized server software or drivers are required to take advantage. So you can provide common infrastructure with consistent data services across virtualized, containerized, and bare metal application deployments. And finally, when you do move to a server-based scale-out application infrastructure like an HCIS or a server-embedded infrastructure approach as we've been talking, endpoint management is really important. Taking care of everything associated with a given server across your fleet, super important. So being able to fleet manage server BIOS updates, SSD firmware updates, storage data services updates, having direct control of both not only the data drives, but the boot drive as well, which simplifies infrastructure provisioning, enables operating system or application image updates across your fleet. And finally, one thing we didn't touch on, the SPU actually operates in a separate fault domain from the server. So you get full access to data, even if the server is down for maintenance. So super cool, right? Now, these 4 design tips that we've just gone through, of course, are all made possible with Nebulon Smart Infrastructure. And most of our customers get started in one of 4 areas. What we call our Cloud Shift on-prem solution is basically what we've been talking about for the last 15, 20 minutes, bringing a cloud-like operating model to distributed application infrastructure on-prem. Internal cloud modernization, this aims at transforming a traditional VMware, VDI environment, server virtualization environment into a more hyperscale internal cloud. Journey to containers is for those organizations beginning a transition to Kubernetes, but want to do so in a way that doesn't leave their virtualized infrastructure behind. And edge transformation brings zero-touch remote management, densification, and cost reduction to the enterprise edge, okay? So if you're keen to learn more, the next step for you is to, number one, tell your friends. Number two, hit nebulon.com and request a demo. If you do that and mention my name, Craig Nunes, you will get a cool t-shirt after you get that, that demo done. In fact, if you register for a demo and don't mention my name, I'm pretty sure you'll still get a cool t-shirt. So do it today. That's all I had. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks for listening.
All right, great presentation, Craig. Really fascinating what you guys are doing at Nebulon to just change the world of storage. I've just brought up a poll question for everyone out there that says, what additional information would you like about the Nebulon solution? And I know we're going to kick it off with some Q&A. Craig, you ready for some questions?
Sure. Yeah, fire away. We're ready.
All right. Let's see. First question that came in here, they're asking about, skills required to use Nebulon. What's it take for someone who's, maybe has storage experience, but they've never seen a solution quite like Nebulon before. What's the ramp up time?
That is such a good question. So we are targeting with this solution, folks. Well, first of all, this is infrastructure. You mentioned storage a couple of times. This is infrastructure, and this is a ideal solution for folks who deal with infrastructure every day. Sure. The reality is, especially if you've got your let's say your templates set up, your experts on your team have set up templates for for virtualization or for MongoDB or whatever. The UI is really set up for folks who might not necessarily be in IT. They might be developers or DevOps teams like we talked about. It's it's really intended to be handled without much of a learning curve whatsoever. In about 2 weeks' time, we intend to roll out on the website sort of a trial, a web trial that you can actually hop in for a day and run through it. And to be honest, if you've done that, you can really master the user side of this. And then for those folks who want to bring their expertise to things like the templates for their stakeholders, their application developers to use, that's super simple as well.
Excellent. Yeah, I love to hear that it's easy to get started. Here's a good question. Ned out there is asking, will Nebulon Smart Infrastructure software delivered as a service maintain both security and integrity of application data from on-premises to the cloud?
Yeah, 100%. And we have vetted a patented, what we call our security triangle, with some of the toughest customers on the planet, folks who, they are hybrid organizations. For one reason or another, they have determined that the data for this application, the Remainer asset that we talked about, is on-prem for good reason. And all of the security around that, they want to make sure is intact. And when you bring cloud-based control plane into the discussion, I think what we can easily show folks, our security model addresses all of the concerns that folks might have. And, you know, a lot of people are familiar today with certain kinds of support automation tools. You know, those effectively are leveraging a, you know, cloud-based presence on the back end, more around monitoring and support. But, you know, a lot of organizations are, they understand the model when you dig into it. But to be honest, our security triangle is very different, vetted by security experts and by, you know, really power users with our customers. So it's a great conversation to have, you know, for folks who are interested in doing this, but just trying to make sure that they cover their bases, because we know just how important protecting your data is wherever it's at.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's see here. Alan's asking, will your tool allow visualization of, and he's got a very long list of, you know, cloud performance topology. What about visualization here?
Yeah. So the UI itself provides some good visualization, but you know, we intend to be able to leverage, you know, things like Grafana and tools like that people sort of know and love to visualize what's going on with their you know, with their various deployments. And so we embrace that and have some capability for that today, but a lot more coming as we go, especially as we, you know, engage with folks and they will, you know, want to see certain things in a special way. That's super easy with the approach we've taken.
Very nice. And for everyone out there who, if you haven't responded to the poll, now's the time to respond, because we are moving on to this slide, which is a cool QR code where you can get a really cool shirt if you just scan that QR code, and you can sign up to do your own personal demo and get this shirt, as Craig had talked about. I'll leave that up here for a moment while we answer some more questions. Here's an interesting question. They're just asking, how does this solution differ from HCI?
You know, I think we talked a bit about it. HCI was such a great breakthrough for organizations, you know, 10 or so years ago, helping folks shift to sort of a server-based scale-out infrastructure for a lot of the important things they do. If you think about sort of the two big aspects of our solution, the cloud-based control plane, the big brain in the cloud, you know, it just brings a lot of capability you can't get with local on-prem cluster by cluster management tools, you know, kind of paired next to sort of a cloud monitoring tool. The whole self-service infrastructure approach we talk about with these curated templates across, you know, virtualized, containerized, and bare metal applications, you know, comes straight out of that, a single programmable API in the cloud for all your automation efforts. Again, giving you a lot of capability to filter by geo or app or internal group or whatever. I love the capability of, you know, software updates and new features that, you know, show up in the cloud. You know, you had to do nothing to your environment to take advantage of those, just like, you know, smart infrastructure elsewhere you might be familiar with. And of course, bringing this sort of fleet-wide endpoint management that's, you know, not just handling server-based data volumes, but your boot volumes and firmware updates across data services and SSDs and expanders and server BIOS and all that stuff managed, you know, at scale. The data plane too is very different from an HCIS data plane, because with server embedded infrastructure software, that, you know, that consumes none of your server CPU memory network overhead. So you get the whole server for your applications. You'll simply buy fewer servers for a given workload, HCIS versus our approach. And the other thing I'd say, because our software is embedded in the server below the OS and hypervisor, it's not tied to any specific software stack. And so you can run VMware, you can run Linux, you can run Windows. There's no special software drivers required for any of those to run with smart infrastructure. So, there's a fair number of key differences there. And for the folks that, are trying to do all the things that we talked about, they're going to find it much easier to take advantage of this. The technology that we're leveraging here has come a long way in 10 years. We're simply putting, a lot of that to good use in modernizing infrastructure and management of that.
Excellent. All right. Well, Craig, I'm afraid we've run out of time in our live Q&A. There's a number of more technical questions there for you in the electronic queue, but so great to have you on the event today. Thank you.
Yeah, love it. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
This is a solution that I know folks really just need to see to believe, so I encourage you to check out the QR code that's on the screen right there, get your own personal demo, and hey, why not get a cool t-shirt to go along with it to impress your friends and IT coworkers. So thanks to Nebulon for supporting the event. Check out the PDF that's also available there in your audience console in the Handouts tab entitled Smart Infrastructure 101 for more detail on the Nebulon solution. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and move on now to our next presentation on today's EcoCast. I'm excited to introduce Mr. Mike Josephson, Lead Solutions Architect at OutSystems. Mike, are you there?
I am indeed. Thanks so much. Pleasure to be here with everybody today.
Great to have you, Mike.
So,
take it away.
You got it. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about OutSystems, and really what fundamentally OutSystems is about is helping our customers build applications quickly, securely, scalable, and in a manner that can adapt very rapidly to changing business dynamics. We're in the low-code space, and why that's important is because this is a really, really rapidly growing part of the software development industry. It's going to be critically important for a lot of ways in which customers and accounts really look to effectively build applications and do it in a manner that can be really brought to market quickly. And as Gartner kind of highlights here is that they're predicting that it's going to be in 65% of all software development will include some element of low code in it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is today. When you look at the space, really, we're a leader in it, right? Whether you look at Forrester or you look at Gartner, we're top right. We've been around for a long time, 20 years actually. The oldest vendor in the space. We were around before low code was low code, before there was even a concept of low code or no code or any of those key buzzwords you hear. And really, fundamentally, we've helped to develop the space. We have a big global footprint. We're growing extremely rapidly. We have a lot of community members. We have a lot of customers that really span the globe, and it's growing bigger every year over year. Not just from a perspective of our customers, but also our community. People that are building applications on the platform that are helping to provide assets that can be leveraged. The OutSystems Forge community is, very, very rapidly growing with new functions and features that can be leveraged within the platform. I'm really thankful for the huge community presence that we have. That's really growing at a substantial rate. We have a lot of customers. Here's just a few of them, well over 1,500 now, just to get a sense for some of the key customers that we've got. And it really ranges in terms of what we do with them, but ultimately we're able to help and assist them with building applications quickly, securely, scalable, and something that can effectively adapt to the future. So when I fundamentally kind of look at that, how are we able to do that? What we've done is we've really distilled development into 4 key layers: data layer, a process layer, a logic layer, and a UI layer. For each of these layers, we have a set of widgets that help to accelerate the development for them. The things that are reusable. So subsequently, you can take the lessons learned from one application and leverage that in subsequent applications, reducing the time and complexity to deliver applications and getting you greater value from the platform as you scale with it and as you deliver more applications. It's drag and drop oriented, so it makes it a lot easier in terms of actually the creation of the application, makes it more accessible to a broad base of people that are interested in really addressing business challenges as opposed to being stuck on what's the technology to make it happen. OutSystems trying to get that out of the way so that people can really deliver those business needs rapidly and quickly. All the while, we're leveraging the lessons learned from our customer base. Those 1,500 customers have made us stronger, more secure, have given us tens and hundreds of thousands of applications that have been built on the platform. And you can really leverage a lot of those lessons learned through some of that AI and ML that's built into the platform to really accelerate that development and optimize the experience of delivering these customer experiences and these employee experiences in a manner that are really expected today. When you look at it, fundamentally, every customer has a different set of systems that they need to work with, whether that's they need to pull data from SQL or Oracle. They have a SAP instance that's inflexible. They need to capture some information there and display it in a different way or run workflows in a non-paper-based process. There's so many different systems and processes out there, and OutSystems really needs to be flexible to integrate with these systems. And so we make it very flexible to pull in the data, to leverage these systems, to update the systems. It's really a critical part of us being able to be the glue within an organization or effectively sit on top of some of these different core systems for our customers. So when we really look at it, one of the core things that we do is really around accelerating the development life cycle. It's not just about being able to build applications quickly, it's being able to deploy them quickly, being able to migrate them quickly. One of our overarching goals as an organization is to be 100x more productive than traditional development. And when you look at that, development isn't just the core lines of code that are being written, but it's also the tangential elements that can slow the development lifecycle down, such as the deployment or updating of the actual underlying application. And so OutSystems has different accelerators like our one-click publish, which helps to deploy the application quickly, update the application quickly. We also have things that kind of help to accelerate the development lifecycle, like ease of migration between environments and things such as that. When it comes to engaging with applications that are built on the platform, there's a variety of different ways in which you can. So whether it's mobile-based applications, web-based applications, OutSystems support those, microservices. But this is an area that's constantly changing. If you look 10 years back, you wouldn't necessarily be thinking of a need from a business perspective of having a mobile application for those that work at that organization or at your organization. It's that technology is changing. It's changing so rapidly, and the ways in which people are interacting with applications are evolving, and the underlying technology really needs to evolve as those expectations evolve as well. So OutSystems constantly is evaluating its stack and finding ways to make different ways of engagement easily accessible within the applications that are built on the platform. So whether that's incorporating some chatbot functionality, whether that's leveraging some type of Alexa integration, OutSystems is constantly evaluating our stack, incorporating accelerators in there to really simplify the development experience, make the end experience really what is expected and demanded from our employees and our customers. So if I have to distill OutSystems to its essence, I really look at it, OutSystems is a full stack development platform where we've distilled the development into those four key layers. I'm just going to jump into it, spend maybe 5 minutes in the platform just to give you an essence of what does that mean? How have we distilled that development into those four core layers? But it kind of gives you a quick perspective there. able to easily integrate and extend. And we have a variety of different ways we can do this. We have Forge components that are accessible and downloadable and can incorporate integrations with systems such as Salesforce, Google Maps, Snowflake. We have an integration builder which allows for very scalable integrations with core systems such as SAP, Microsoft Dataverse, that type of thing. Basically, we've found multiple different ways to provide easily accessible, easily adaptable integrations with a variety of different core systems that are commonly leveraged with our client base. We've accelerated the entirety of the development lifecycle, so things like built-in versioning, built-in deployment, stuff like that really help to accelerate that development experience and really being able to build out high-quality, pixel-perfect, tailored applications that help to provide the greatest efficiencies for employees that leverage these applications, or those really high-quality, good-looking applications that our customers want to use and want to leverage. It really helps with the adoption and scalability of an actual application itself. When I look at it from a perspective of what are some of the core types of applications that our customers are building, I think this is a good encapsulation of a lot of what we see. Things that are even more B2C focused or B2B focused, where you have to have that really high quality user interface, but it helps to accelerate a need, whether that's building out a B2B business portal, deploying a mobile application that can be provided within the associated Android or Apple stores. Really, there's a variety of different needs, but OutSystems can help and support that. Also, from a perspective of providing some innovations within an actual workplace, there's a lot of needs, and there's not a lot of times the development horsepower to get it done because there's such a huge backlog. But OutSystems, because you're able to deliver applications so quickly, can really help to address that backlog, to provide those efficiencies and automate, even in certain circumstances, processes that are inefficient, paper-based, or even just in need of new architecture. And also, one of the real core differentiator for OutSystems as it compares to a lot of our competitors in the space is the ability to go really deep. We have customers that have large legacy systems that need to be modernized. They're either on deprecated technology. I know of some customers that are running applications in VB6, not supported, don't have backup, have millions of dollars of business value in it. That's a security risk. It's a real business risk, because if something happens to these legacy applications, it can cause a lot of trouble within an organization. So OutSystems can help to modernize that and replatform that very rapidly. Just to give a couple of quick examples of customers, we have Daimler Trucks, maybe you've heard of them before, leveraging OutSystems for mission-critical applications that can be leveraged by a substantial amount of internal users within an organization. And they're actually built out a proficiency on the platform that allows them to build out multiple different applications through the course of the year, getting a lot of business value from the underlying platform. Think Money as well, really cool mobile application that's been able to be developed extremely rapidly, and also has been able to basically update consistently. So not only getting to market quickly, but also updating consistently to keep them really ahead of the market. So I think both were great examples of some of the creative solutions that you can effectively build on the platform very rapidly. So that said, I'm going to just jump into the platform. I'll spend maybe about 5-7 minutes in the platform just to give you a quick 10,000-foot view of what we do. So give me 1 second while I share my screen here. So with OutSystems, you have, there's a couple of key parts that make it up. In this case, what I'm going to jump into is Service Studio. Service Studio is really where the core of the development takes place in the platform. This would be encapsulation of all the apps that I've developed in my environment. Now, one of the great things is there's always accelerators within the platform, ranging from some pre-existing applications. Like you'll see here, you can use these as starting points for your development. You can use them as reference points for how to structure, modularize your app, to just kind of building your own fundamental application. I'm just going to build out a reactive web application to give you a sense here. Just to provide a little context on what I'd like to build here is I'm just going to build out a customer management app here just to get a perspective on who my end customers are, maybe where they're geographically located. See some core metrics on those end customers. So I'm going to go ahead and select this. Brought to the point where I can build a layered structure for my application architecture. This is a really powerful part of the platform. A lot of times you see it, you're like, oh, it's got a module, that's great. But what's really cool about it is fundamentally it allows for the scalability that I mentioned earlier. So I can have an integration layer to SAP, or I can have this integration layer to Salesforce, and I can really encapsulate that in my application architecture and build these reusable elements that make it up. So you'll notice on my left-hand side, I've got my contextual low-code widgets. These are going to vary based on the type of development I'm doing. So whether I'm doing my process workflow development or my look and feel development, that interface, or my underlying logic. So either the integrations, REST-based web services, integrations through integration builder. You'll notice that as I'm doing the development, this is going to change. And then also my data structure. So this can really be emblematic of either pulling in data from an external system. So if I had, say, like a pre-existing SQL database or Oracle database, I wanted to pull something in there, I could easily do that. If I want to create my own components, I can do that as well. In this case, I just pulled in some data from Excel. We just seen kind of OutSystems dynamically analyze that and provided me some data structures that I could use within my actual application itself. So I'm going to go ahead and just create my customer screen here. What this is going to do is it's going to basically give me a view into all the customers that I have within this data structure. So if I double click it, you'll see that I've got kind of an overview of my customers. So in this case, I've got a paginated list, searchable, provides me kind of a high-level detail. One of the great things about the platform is it's really fit to purpose. So if I need to make some changes to it, so let's say here, I want to have the address here, I don't need the mobile number, I can kind of quickly update the initial look and feel to something that really resonates with what I'm looking for. In addition to this overview screen, it actually also created a detail screen where I could see some of the more granular details related to my customer, or update it as well, or create a new one. And it's built in that specific logic here so that I don't necessarily have to, or I can update it at a later point as well. So it's building the framework for me to really simplify that overall development process. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit that one-click publish button. What OutSystems does is it takes the application, compiles it down to native code, uploads it, and makes it accessible to me. So I can go ahead and pull that up right here. You'll see I've got all my customers. I can select a record, pulls that data back. And I was able to do that very rapidly, just leveraging the platform. Now, I might want to visually represent where this customer is, right? I've got their address, but I'd like to kind of see it. So what I can do is I can actually pull up a mapping component to visually represent that. Now, OutSystems, as I mentioned, has the OutSystems Forge, which is a really great repository of 3,800 components now. It's actually gone up 100 since the last time I updated my slides. That's the power of how much is added in a very rapid time within the platform. And there's a bunch of different components that I could use. We got Google Mapping components, OutSystems mapping. I've got a lot of different ways I can basically address a core business requirement. But what the nice thing about this is that it really reduces the level of effort and needed to incorporate it in, and simplifies the overall process for pulling it in itself, right? So in this case, I've got a Google Maps component that I want to pull in, that I would like on this right-hand side to visualize it. You'll notice I have two new widgets here. That's where it's extensible. So if there is that edge case, if there is a complex need and something's not addressed out of the box with a platform, there tends to be a variety of different ways in which you can address it. So I drag and drop this in here, and then now what I want to do is specify what I would actually be showing in that. So you can see here how OutSystems is basically predictively given me a recommendation on what I might want to be, what I might want to use to populate that value. That's part of that AI ML layer within the platform. You actually notice that it's really built in at multiple different layers. So if I want to build a REST API, it's going to give me predictions there. If I'm developing, there's going to be an engine that sits on top of it and highlights when there might be a logical construction issue or something that I need to be aware of. It's really about proactively addressing or demonstrating to me things that I should be aware of. And you'll notice here, I was able to incorporate that in very, very rapidly. Now, let's say what I'd like to do here is I want to do, let's say I want to build out a REST API. In this case, what I want to do is I want to expose a REST API. So in this, I'm going to do my customer's API. I'd like to basically provide access to my customer data. So what I'll do is I'll say get all customers, and then I'll return here my customer list. Another thing you'll notice that it's dynamically changing data types and stuff like that, so I don't have to worry about it. I'm going to use some of the AI-assisted development to help me with building out this AI, right, or this REST service. So what I'm going to do here is get my customers, and then what I'd like to do is take the result of that and then pass that out to the calling service here, so the calling system or component that would be leveraging this API. So I'm going to go ahead and then deploy that. So I was using that AI-assisted development to give me the recommendations. It's smart enough to understand some of the contextual elements that are going on here and give me the recommendations on how to do that. And then I went ahead and deployed it. And you can see here, I now have a API that I can subsequently leverage within my overall ecosystem. That can just give you a quick view of what I can do there. So I know that I'm coming up on my time, but I think I'd like to show one more thing before I open it for Q&A. So what I'll do here is I'm going to build out real quickly a screen to really manage some of the feedback from my customers. So you'll see here we've got a variety of different screen templates that can be used as a starting point for the look and feel of my actual screen. And what it really does is it provides a really excellent starting point for that look and feel layer. It's difficult sometimes when I'm doing development to kind of conceptualize what's the best way to look at a screen or look at what I'm fundamentally trying to build from a business logic perspective. But having something like this really helps to build out something that's a little bit more tailored, a little bit more focused, and kind of meets the end needs of the customer in a way that looks good. And then as an example here, what I was able to do is just drag and drop that customer note here. It's already updated kind of the structure and some of the key attributes to the screen to meet the end requirements of my business requirements. One last thing, one final thing to show here, and then I'll open it up for Q&A is, let's say I want to understand what my customers are by region. What I can do is I can say I have my customers by region here. You'll notice that as I dropped this low-code widget here, it also reflected that there was an issue here, basically highlighting where that was, pointing me to what I needed to fix. In this case, what I need to understand a little bit more is what's the data that I'm going to use behind it. So let me quickly just show, hey, I need my customers, and I want to know what they are by region and the number that they are. So just quickly getting that in there. And then let me add this in here. And then using, again, that predictive engine to simplify my development, takes care of the problems, allows me to deploy it, and I'm able to deploy that application again. So already you can see I was able to deploy 4 or 5 times this application within just the last couple of minutes of talking to you, and now I have the application available. So let me just kind of real quickly show you that screen here. Got that in there, got the notes pulled back, and that was really the heart of what I wanted to show. So thank you all so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And I'll open it up to Q&A.
Absolutely, yeah. Cool presentation, cool demo. Thank you so much for sharing that demo with us. It's fun to see these products like OutSystems in action. So, and that was really powerful. So we do have a lot of questions here for you from the audience. I'll go ahead and just bring up the poll question that we always have at the end of these presentations for everyone out there that says, what additional information would you like about OutSystems? And we'll leave that up while we take audience questions. So let's see, first one that came in here, they're asking kind of about the architecture of OutSystems. Does it require a local installation?
There's a little bit of flexibility that you have there. We have the OutSystems Cloud, which is basically OutSystems managed. In that case, you don't have to worry about any of the underlying infrastructure. There are some of our customers that say, hey, you know what, we like to manage it all ourselves, and we have our own Azure, AWS, or on-premise instance, and we want to use that. And we actually support both, but I see most now, probably about 60-70% of my customers go OutSystems Cloud because it's just easier to leverage, less work needed.
Great. Okay, I like that. And then there's another question about third-party integrations. What's available there?
We have a lot of third-party integrations, and basically what I showed on the OutSystems Forge, there's 3,850 different components there, and it's going to range from, say, like the Snowflake integration, Google Maps integration, but really touches on a lot of different things. And also that integration builder, which is another even more easily accessible integration layer within the platform that allows us to integrate with SAP, Salesforce. So generally speaking, the large bulk of the integrations that we do with customers will usually be able to be handled through the Forge integration builder or a REST or SOAP-based web service, and have yet to run into a system we can't find an integration to yet, but that tends to be the ways that I would look at from a matter of how I would be able to address that business requirement, probably be through one of those key means.
Got it, okay. Let's see, Ned is asking, can I develop outdated legacy software applications as well as complex applications? Can both of those be redeveloped in OutSystems?
Yes, absolutely. What I usually find is a lot of our customers will start kind of kicking the tires with the platform. Like you hear me say, hey, low code can do everything. And you're like, let me kick the tires of the platform and let me really see that that's the case. And I totally want you to do that. I want you to push the platform, because what you end up finding is, like what I'll see with some of our big customers is what they'll do is they'll say, hey, first year they start building out, maybe they've got some legacy applications, some VB6, Power Builder apps, these apps that are totally in need of replacement. then they get the comfort with the platform and they say, hey, you know what, we can actually build a lot of things here. And hey, can I handle this mission critical application, a la what Daimler did, right? And then they go from there and they say, you know what, I've got actually a large scale legacy system and I want to re-platform that. And then they see that you can do that. I've got a customer here, and I'm based out of the west part of the US, and I've got a customer here that had a large, marketing system, 20-year-old, and they said, hey, OutSystems, can you re-platform that? And we said, yeah, we can do that. We can do that in 6 months. Now, they've been with us for a couple of years, so they had that built up, that comfort over time that, you know what, OutSystems can really handle mission-critical, large legacy applications, and that modularization, that three-layer canvas approach really allows us to scale to these complex architectures. So we do have the ability to handle kind of that wealth and gamut of different use cases. Excellent.
And then let's see, probably last question we have time for here. They're asking, is there a free tier of OutSystems?
Yes, there is. If you go to outsystems.com, and then in the top right corner, it's going to be like get started for free. I highly recommend signing up for the free version of the platform. It gives you access to Service Studio. A lot of the core components that I just walked you through today, you could build that same app on it. And it's a really great way to kick the tires of the platform. Honestly, that's why I joined OutSystems. They were like, hey, why don't you actually play around with this technology, see what you think about it? And I played around with it, and I was like, I really like the way that we approach development and application creation. And we believe that if you have that opportunity to see for yourself, you're going to feel the same way. And so we make it available for anybody that wants. So outsystems.com, top right, get started for free, and you can be playing around with OutSystems in 5 minutes.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's all the time we have. Really great presentation. Thanks so much for being on the event today, Mike.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
For more information on OutSystems, check out the Handouts tab there as well. There is a resource that you can download. And also, as Mike said, visit outsystems.com. Click on Get Free, and you can get started with OutSystems for yourself. I'll leave the poll question up while I announce our next Amazon $500 gift card winner. This one is going out to Lee Hodge from North Carolina. Congratulations, Lee Hodge from North Carolina. Still another gift card to give out on the event, so make sure you stay tuned for that. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and move on now to our next presentation on today's EcoCast. I'm excited to introduce Michael Melberg, Vice President of Marketing for Cybersecurity and in the Anti-Tamper Group at Wind River. Michael, thanks for being on.
All right, thank you, David. Thanks for having me. Well, it looks like a Michael followed by a Mike, the most popular name of 1980 through 1984. So that certainly dates me. I'm not sure about the other Mike, but it was great seeing the other presentation. And I wanted to bring a little bit of a different perspective to today's talk, namely the cybersecurity perspective, because as we build these modern applications, we find more and more out there that cybersecurity is an issue, and it's becoming harder and harder to sort of hide from the current cybersecurity issues that are out there. So I'm gonna talk about that today, but just a little bit more about me, and so you know where I'm coming from. Again, my name is Michael Melberg. I go by Mike with Wind River's Technology Protection and Cybersecurity Group, which is called the Star Lab Group. And I've been in the field of technology protection and cybersecurity for almost the past 20 years now. I got my start doing software security, protecting applications against reverse engineering and tampering. Then, some of the hardware guys, beat some hardware knowledge into me over the years and showed me the importance of protecting applications and embedded systems from a hardware perspective, and then how to tie the two together, how to leverage hardware security features for the purposes of software security. And then moved into cryptography, where we're just exclusively focused on sort of different crypto algorithms and how to utilize those to solve different real-world security challenges and privacy challenges. And now, again, I'm with Star Lab Group out of the Wind River Company, working out of the Washington, D.C. area, just securing embedded systems against and modern applications against the different kinds of attacks. Some of which you've probably seen in the news recently, and some of them that you may haven't. I've got a list of modern threats to embedded systems, and had I given this presentation, say, 5 years ago, I probably would have had to handpick threats over the decade previous to that. But now here we are in 2021, and I'm literally going to list a couple of threats here, 6 of them that have happened in the past less than 12 months. So the threat vectors are increasing. The number of threats to embedded modern applications is increasing, and it really, I'll just draw a line in the sand here. Started just a little less than, or I should say, a little more than a year ago with this threat DroverRub, which was a command and control malware that, if installed on a modern machine running Linux, could give complete network access and user privileges, root level privileges to the attacker that's sitting on the other side. So it's quite a nasty piece of malware, and if you look that one up, you'll see where it came from, or where we believe it came from, and how it may be being utilized. Now, that one in particular is just a command and control piece of malicious code, but it needs a vector for attack. And that's where attacks like Blindside and so many others come in. Blindside was another attack released not too long after DroverRub, which actually gave an attacker the ability to get into a system and make modifications, potentially installing something like a DroverRub malware into the system. And this was based on a return-oriented programming style attack, again in the Linux console, and it was pretty nasty. It hit the news, maybe not as popular as this next one that I'll talk about here, SolarWinds, but certainly did get some press. SolarWinds probably goes without mention, right? Everybody has heard of this or seen it. This was almost appeared to be somewhat of an insider threat, where people got the signing keys and were able to upload malicious code and sign it so that it looked like it was coming from a legitimate internal authority of sorts. But this was a very wide-scale attack that affected many, many systems and certainly made a big splash in the news. This next one here, which was just recently, I think the beginning of the summer, the Colonial Pipeline attack, a ransomware attack. This one actually affected me, not terribly, but it increased the lines that I had to wait for in the gas at the gas stations by quite a bit. And for the first time ever, I saw 2 vehicles parked on the side of the road, and as we drove forward, we noticed the poor people walking with the gas cans back to their vehicle. They had run out of gas. So definitely affecting sort of way of life, at least here on the East Coast and maybe in some other places. This one didn't affect me, but maybe equally as scary, the JBS meat supplier hack, another ransomware attack, I believe. And this one, though, affecting the supply chain for food, which is quite frightening. And then the question becomes, what's next? I mean, there was another one shortly after JBS, which was the Electronics Art attack, where they lost a significant amount of IP to different attackers. So, the point here is that these attacks are just escalating, and we all sort of have to find ways to figure out how to protect against them. And traditionally, in a modern application, we think about keeping the attacker out. But if it's not clear by now, just with those 6 that I listed there, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to keep the bad guy out of the system. And there's some real reasons why. I mean, number one, we can never find all the bugs or vulnerabilities in a modern application, right? There are too many lines of code. Finding all the bugs is, I believe, a mathematically provably impossible task. Even if you could find all of the vulnerabilities in a system, even if you could do that, 100% of the vulnerabilities, well, tomorrow there'd be a new vulnerability discovered, a new tool that comes out that, makes all of that previous work null and void. So that's number one. Number two, attackers are always coming up with new tools, right? So even if we could find all the vulnerabilities, the attacker tomorrow is going to come up with some new tool that finds a new exploit or finds a creative way to break into the system. And number three, this is really this is really disheartening, which is the imbalance that we face against an attacker with our applications. We, the defender, have to protect against all different attacks out there. We have to defend against all vulnerabilities in order to protect our our applications. The attacker, on the other hand, only has to find one. The second that they find one, and they're going to find the easiest one. They're not going to go through the hardest way to attack the system. They're going to find the easiest one. And as soon as they find one, well, then it can be game over, or it can be a little bit of a privilege escalation attack where they gain more and more privileges in the system before they gain complete command and control of the system. So we have to change our assumption with the applications that we're developing and the systems that we're releasing. We can no longer assume that we can keep the bad guy out. We have to change our assumption and assume that the attacker is already in the system. Because if we can't keep the bad guy out, well then guess what? They're in there. And now the question becomes, if we change our mindset, now we can ask a more important question, which is not how do we keep the bad guy out, but how do we protect the most important pieces of data, the most important algorithms that are in our applications. So how do we do that? Well, over the past, as I said, almost 20 years now, I've been working with many folks and across the security industry and cryptography and hardware security and software security. And there are really some fundamental properties of a secure system that come up time and time again. And these security properties, if you enable them, if you build them into your modern applications, we'll never be able to prevent the attacker from getting in 100%, but we can make it really, really hard. We can make it very difficult, so difficult, hopefully, that we're able to release a new update with new countermeasures before they have a chance to break into the first one, and everything becomes null and void from them, and they've just wasted their time. And I won't go into each one of these in detail. They actually fall into sort of nice buckets that follow the operational state of your application as it goes through development and as it sits at rest, and then as it gets deployed and it operates out in the field. So if we take those 10 properties and we apply them to these different operational states, then we can start to break down the cybersecurity problem for applications and make it a really easier task to secure the applications and prevent cyber attacks from happening, which could destroy our company's brand reputation, release our secret sauce to competitors or to foreign adversaries, et cetera, et cetera. And the first thing we have to do really is protect the data, and it should probably say applications at rest. Whatever the data is, whether that's a proprietary algorithm or some secret sauce, some secret information, whatever those bits are that we want to protect, we need to make sure that they are protected at rest. And we don't do that just by hiding it or obfuscating it, which just means jumbling it up in a way. We really want to use strong encryption for that, so that the data that we've protected is strongly protected against many different types of attacks. And we can authenticate that data, and we can make sure that it is the data that we released with the system and hasn't been changed or modified in some way. Now, with an encryption, by encrypting our applications, that we need a key to both encrypt and decrypt and sign and verify and authenticate and all of that. And that key then becomes sort of the keys to the kingdom. And the attacker's not going to try to break the encryption. They're going to try and find the key. So we got to make sure once we encrypt everything and protect the data at rest, that we store our root keys in hardware somewhere where that forces the attacker to sort of escalate the amount, the difficulty, escalate the number of tools that they have to use, escalate the knowledge that they need in order to make their attack successful. Once we protect the software with encryption so that it's statically protected on disk, then the next step is to protect it through the boot process, right? So in this case, we're talking about an embedded system here. In some cases, you might be talking about an application that's just kicking off from the operating system. Whatever that is, we have to get it from its encrypted state into a decrypted state so that it can run. But we want to do that in such a way that we are protecting the boot process so that our software can't be replaced by a malicious software load. So we can check the environment. In the case of the secure boot, we can make sure before we decrypt that we're checking the environment, that we're not on a lab bench somewhere, that all the peripherals and components that are connected to our system are the components and peripherals that we expect to be there, and nothing more and nothing less. And once we do that, then we can authenticate our software load, whether it's the operating system or bare metal application or whatever it may be, with that encryption, right? We can use authentication, release the keys from the hardware, and perform an authentication to make sure that our software load hasn't changed. And only then do we decrypt and launch our hypervisor or our kernel or our applications from the system. At that point, we've, maybe haven't guaranteed, but we're reasonably assured that the system that we have up and running is the system that we deployed and not one that's been modified through its operational use. And we need to make sure now that the data that's now in operation, the applications that are now running, are protected. And there's a couple things that we can do there. We can isolate the applications using virtual machines or containers so that if an attacker gains access, maybe they only gain access to one container and they can't break out of that and gain access to other containers that have other sensitive information or algorithms that we're trying to protect. We can control the interface to hardware devices, so components on our system that our applications are using. We can make sure that the applications are only using the components that they're allowed to and authorized to, and nothing more. And then we can restrict some of the interfaces at the operating system to make sure that we're doing, for example, only loading signed drivers in the Linux kernel. And this protects us operationally so that as we run our applications, they aren't exploited. Our data, our sensitive data and applications aren't exploited. And then finally, data in motion. This is, the sort of the counterpart to data at rest. Data in motion just means that we're moving data between devices, either within our system or we're sending them outside of our system. Our applications, most modern applications now, are constantly communicating over the internet with users, with other applications out there. We want to make sure that that is authenticated, encrypted communication, that we're denying the communication that's coming in by default unless we can authenticate it. That we're checking our inputs to make sure that nobody is trying to send malicious code to us as they're, say, entering a password or something like that. And we're monitoring the integrity of the application. We're auditing the application as it runs to make sure that we are checking for attacks and quantifying an attack if it happens, and then providing some sort of response, whether that's to shut down our application, or even quarantine specific pieces of it, or restart it if we're in a container-based situation. Maybe we restart it with a golden copy to get the system back up and running. So all of these together, right? You can't take just one of these because the application that you're developing and running is going to go through all these states. So you just want to make sure that you look through each one of these operational states of the application and apply the correct properties from those 10 properties that I mentioned before. Make sure that you're protecting it through all the states of the system, and that we have some reasonable assurance that we're protected against the attacker, even if they're already in the system with root administrative privileges. And so there's a couple of very interesting real-world problems we can solve, and I thought I would just mention two of them here. One is, cyber resiliency. Think about a fighter jet, for example, or even a commercial airline. Boy, that thing has to keep working, right? Even if it's under attack, you don't want to start shutting down systems because you detect that you're under attack, or allow the attacker to shut down systems when you're in the air. It becomes a safety problem. So if you were to just use 3 of these 10 properties, reducing the attack surface so that you're only putting code that is necessary for the mission and nothing more, thereby reducing the number of vulnerabilities that you've published out with this system. If you partition the hardware so that you're only utilizing the hardware that you need and nothing more, preventing an attacker from gaining access to one piece of hardware and then exploiting another piece and pivoting over and gaining more and more access throughout the system. And then doing the same thing on the software side with containerization and isolation of software applications, such that if an attacker gains access to one application, they can't pivot and gain access to others. Well, then you have something called some level of cyber resiliency, which is allowing you to continue operating the critical functionality even in the event of some type of cyber attack. Another practical application, which is actually very related, is software updates. So if you have, for example, a software update that you need to push for whatever reason, maybe it's a cyber attack and you're fixing a vulnerability, and maybe it's just feature functionality that you're adding. Well, with your data at rest protection, which again is encrypting the application as it sits at rest on the disk, and secure communication, which is encrypting the communication, authenticating it before it gets sent over to your system. And by using something called least privilege and mandatory access control, we're enforcing the least amount of privilege. We're not giving applications or users more privileges to the system than they are allowed to in order to do the mission. And we're enforcing that with mandatory access control policies. And then if we configure the system correctly, well, then we can ship updates securely over the wire using authenticated encrypted communication, and then check the privileges of that as it gets installed onto the system. And we could do in-flight updates. Now, maybe we don't want to push updates to, a commercial airliner as it's flying just to add new features. But if we think about cyber resiliency, perhaps if we have all of these pieces in place and we detect a cyber attack that is taking down our ability to fly the plane or complete the mission, we could load in that golden copy, authenticate it, decrypt it, and release it, thereby avoiding the attack that happens. These are some of the different problems that you can solve using the security, which go sort of above and beyond just keeping the bad guy out, and really add cyber resiliency and additional security functionality to the system itself. So all that said, what's the takeaway? Well, the takeaway is, as we saw from the beginning, we've got many different attacks that are coming out on a daily basis at this point. And so protecting the mission, it seems like it might be an impossible task. And if you're trying to keep the bad guys out of the system, it very well might be. But if you assume that they're already in, and you take step 2 there, which is protecting the data and the applications at rest through boot while they're in motion and in transit between different parts of the system and inside and outside the applications, then you can gain the benefits there that we would list in step 3, which is maintaining cyber resiliency, being able to securely update your software and other benefits, whether it's in flight or on a ground system or on a network-based device, something as simple as an application running in a thermostat in your home. So all of these together, give us some additional functionality, and they make sure that we have the ability to deploy our modern applications in a secure way, protect our intellectual property, our sensitive algorithms and data, our customers' private data in these modern applications that we're releasing. Now, I really blew through this quite quickly with only 20 minutes. So I just wanted to mention that we have a deeper training on this, and if any of this is interesting to you, or if, for example, you are faced with cybersecurity requirements, whether they're from the government or from NIST or from anywhere for that matter, that have to do with technology protection or cybersecurity, we have a couple-hour training course that we give for free to companies, and it's all virtual. And you just join us virtually, and we can spend an hour and a half to 2 hours on the phone, with your company and the security experts or the people that have security requirements levied on them, and walk you through each one of those 10 properties in great detail, in addition to showing you how some of these different hardware attacks and software attacks, both from a reverse engineering and a tampering perspective, work, so you can get a sense for how attackers tackle this problem and then how we defenders go about defending it. If you're interested in that, get in touch with us, and we can reach out to you and see if that 10 Properties of Secure Embedded Systems training course is a good fit for your company. And so with that, I'll just leave you with my contact information here. And hopefully I'm on time and have left a few minutes for questions.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Michael. We do have some questions for you from the audience. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the poll question here for everyone in the audience out there. We want to get your feedback on what additional information you would like from Wind River and about the Wind River solution that you just learned about. So let's see. First question here that came in for you, Michael. They're asking if, say, a company manufactures some new widget that you're going to buy, does Wind River offer any sort of professional services to certify that widget's security posture?
Oh, yeah, good question. Yeah, so we have a professional services team that has quite a bit of security knowledge. We often do risk assessments for different companies to look at the architecture, look at what security pieces have already been put in place, or if no security pieces have been put in place, which security tools and technologies or adjustments to the architecture might make sense. So we do have a professional services team that does that, and they can come in and even map to specific requirements. Wind River, in fact, has a long history in safety certified requirements and security requirements knowledge. And so we can look at architectures, we can map those to specific requirements that you're facing, and tell you where you might be vulnerable, where you might be open, or where you may not be meeting requirements, and what you might be able to do to adjust and fix those.
Excellent. Yeah, that could be very helpful. Another question here, they're asking, do I need to get any special hardware to implement these security measures you're talking about?
Special hardware? No. So there are many different pieces of hardware, commercial off-the-shelf pieces of hardware exist, and the more modern they are, typically the more security features they have. So some of the modern Intel processors, for example, they have something called Intel TXT T-boot, which is a secure boot, an authentication sequence that works with a BIOS to bring a system up securely. A lot of the modern FPGAs have very advanced security features that you can use. So it really depends on your application. We always recommend leveraging hardware security features that are on the platform in order to make it as secure as possible, because if we can tie to hardware, well, then we can force the attacker to have to get into sort of hardware level attacks, which tend to be more expensive and more complicated. But again, it's going to depend on the platform that you have, the board that you're using. If you're in a selection phase for your hardware and you can choose the board, we could even provide guidance on which boards would help you meet the mission requirements and have great security features with them. If you've already selected a piece of hardware, then we can help point out which security features, if any, could be leveraged to make your software more secure.
Got it. Okay. And what about the trade-off between performance and security when you talk about putting in these additional security controls?
So, yeah, there's always trade-off between security and something. That sometimes that's performance. Oftentimes that's cost, whether in time or money. And you have to assess that, because you can spend the life of the universe protecting your system and continuing to add more and more security countermeasures to it and never ever deploying, which kind of defeats the purpose. So we often will do a risk. I mentioned a risk assessment earlier. We'll often do a risk assessment just to find what are the critical parts of the system, how important are they, how vulnerable are they to attack, what's the consequence if they get lost, and sort of map out in a meaningful way what should be protected. And then we go into, helping our customers understand, okay, depending on what needs to be protected, how much protection should we put in place and how does that impact the performance? In many cases, we can leverage hardware, for example, with encryption to get extremely fast encryption and very minimal performance impact, negligible almost performance impact. But it just depends on the system and what's available to us, and again, what the risks are and how we're addressing those risks.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, Michael, I'm afraid we're out of time here on our live Q&A. There's some more technical questions for you in the electronic queue there, but a really great presentation. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Okay, thank you.
For more information on Wind River, check out the handouts tab there. And there's a link that'll take you to windriver.com, and you can read more about the Wind River solution and see some use cases and case studies as well of other customers who have implemented this to better secure their modern applications. All right, thank you to everyone who responded there to the poll question. Let's keep the EcoCast moving here. And I'm excited now to introduce you to our next presenter. Welcome, Bassam Tabara, founder and CEO of Upbound. Bassam, are you there?
Hi, yes. Hi, how's it going?
Going great. Thanks for being on the EcoCast today. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Let me see. So, hi, I'm Bassam Tabara. I am the CEO and founder of Upbound. Today, I wanted to spend time talking about modern applications, and specifically around the idea of using self-service infrastructure to support them. I think when you talk about modern applications, people think about frameworks for building applications, and they think about tool sets for building them, and what languages and what how they're composing these applications. But often people don't think about the infrastructure required to run these applications, whether it's cloud infrastructure, resources, databases, message queues, caches, etc., or it's the actual clusters or VMs that run the workloads that run the application workloads themselves. And when we talk to customers, we see a few anti-patterns. And in some cases, people give access to their application teams, give them access directly to cloud and infrastructure. And in such cases, that's considered an anti-pattern because a lot of people, like a lot of the application engineers and application teams, struggle with configuring things correctly, ensuring that the best security practices are implemented, or even not running up costs, which comes up a lot with our customers. And so the pattern we're seeing very frequent, a repeating pattern these days is that people are essentially in large companies and in smaller companies are creating an intermediate layer between application teams and the actual infrastructure, including cloud. And they're organizing into platform teams that are responsible for running and managing infrastructure and exposing a self-service experience to these application teams for them to do their work. This intermediate platform tends to be the layer where security controls are enforced, cost controls, governance, compliance, all of it happens through this intermediate layer. And this becomes even more important when you are dealing with hybrid infrastructure or multi-cloud infrastructure, or any heterogeneous environment where you are outside of the walled gardens of a single vendor. And it's hard to kind of think about platforms these days without talking about Kubernetes, because in almost all of the cases that we talk to companies that are running platforms and have platform engineering teams, they tend to deploy Kubernetes. In a lot of ways, you can think of Kubernetes as a container orchestration system, which is where its roots are. But we think of Kubernetes as a framework for building new platforms. And I want to dig into that and talk a little about how this idea has become a popular idea in the cloud native space, and it is a fundamental, now becoming a fundamental part of building platforms. So if you look at Kubernetes, you can look at it again as a container orchestration platform, but there are really two parts to it. There is a control plane, represented as a crane here, that is responsible for configuring and scaling and managing the actual containers and way they run. And then there's the actual containers and running containers and on nodes and doing all the kubelet work as part of that. Really, Kubernetes pioneered the idea of a control plane in the open source community and in the cloud native community. The key principles here was that it exposed a declarative API that enabled folks to set essentially declarative statements of what they want to run. A common thing that you see in Kubernetes is you tell Kubernetes, I want to run 3 replicas of a container. And then at that point, it's responsible for making that happen. But the other thing that's super important here is that Kubernetes, actually the API for Kubernetes, separated between concerns. Some parts of the API were designed for platform teams, and these are the teams that understand infrastructure and can set policies and quotas and can configure nodes and can configure things like networking as part of setting it up. And then the second part was tailored to application teams that can self-service on things like pods and replica sets and everything else as part of the the namespace scoped APIs. And that both of those, both parts of this API work against the same control plane. The control plane is authoritative for the configuration, and controllers take the declarative statements that both the platform teams and app teams have set and are able to make it happen in the environment or in the cluster that Kubernetes is running in. So this includes both day one operations like provisioning infrastructure and launching containers on nodes, but it also includes scale acts and monitoring acts and upgrade acts and failover and all sorts of things that are considered day 2 to day 99 type operations. A really important design point that Kubernetes pioneered here was that when the human workflows end, when the configuration is written to the control plane. At that point, from that point onwards, it's the controllers that take control and are able to essentially make it so and keep it so. So we got excited about the approach that Kubernetes kind of pioneered here, and we wanted to extend it beyond the container scenarios. And so we created a project, a new open source project. It is a CNCF project called Crossplane. And Crossplane is an extension to Kubernetes that enables you to essentially extend the control plane to manage all cloud and all infrastructure. So you literally have API endpoints now, declarative API endpoints for every resource offered by any infrastructure or cloud vendor. You're able to create compositions of these and expose them as new APIs and API endpoints that you can use. You're able to add your policies and guardrails as part of the control plane. And then you're able to offer a self-service experience for your application teams. So in a lot of ways, you can think of Crossplane as supercharging Kubernetes. It's able, while Kubernetes had a great approach for running and managing containers, Crossplane extends that approach to managing all of infrastructure, including cloud and hybrid and multi-cloud infrastructure. So let me show you kind of the end result. So with Crossplane, you can now, the control plane is now able, the platform teams are able to set configuration and policies that essentially configure cloud infrastructure. This is the VPCs, the network configuration, IAM policies, security groups, all of that stuff could be set through the Crossplane API and can be done by platform teams. platform teams can also create compositions of infrastructure, whether they want to expose a SQL database or an RDS instance, or they're able to create a catalog of services through Crossplane and then offer a self-service experience to the application teams in the same way that Kubernetes has done in the container space. And finally, just like with Kubernetes, with Crossplane, you're able to now do day 2 operations on cloud infrastructure. So you're able to essentially set logic to do scaling and monitoring and upgrading and failover acts over the plethora of resources supported by Crossplane. So Crossplane has a very vibrant ecosystem. Because it supports the Kubernetes API at its heart, and because it's built as an extension of Kubernetes, you can leverage any of the tooling that you know and love around the Kubernetes API, whether it's GitOps tooling, Argo and Flux, or you like to put things in Helm charts, or the popular kubectl tooling or Customize, but even things that are even within the Kubernetes API, like open policy agents and other admission hooks and webhooks that you can place in. All of those work out of the gate. All of them work now on top of cloud and infrastructure as soon as you install Crossplane into your Kubernetes cluster. We have a rich set of vendors that are building providers to Crossplane, including AWS and Azure and Alibaba Cloud and Red Hat, VMware, and a lot more. And we are also able to wrap Terraform providers and bring them into the control plane themselves. They look like native providers. If you're familiar with CRDs and controllers, every Terraform resource looks like a CRD and has a controller associated with it that's able to reconcile it. So essentially, with Crossplane, you are able to get to the dream of a single point of control for the entire surface area of infrastructure and cloud. So we started this journey almost 3 years ago, and we look at Kubernetes and Crossplane as an evolution of how we run and manage infrastructure. If you think about, we went from scripting in the 1990s to infrastructure as code, tooling like Terraform and Ansible, which taught us how to do declarative configuration management, and provisioning. But now we're in the era of control planes. We've gone from declarative configuration to declarative API, self-service, and a separation of concern that I talked about is an important part of control planes. And we're able to achieve much higher degrees of automation by running controllers that do day 2 operations as part of the control plane. Whereas infrastructure as code tooling is typically limited to initial provisioning and re-provisioning. So Crossplane is, as I mentioned, an open source project. It's 3 years in production now. It's a vibrant community. It is a CNCF project, follows an open governance model, and the project is literally taking off. We cannot be more excited about the adoption, both measured in ecosystem adoption as well as end user adoption around the project. So now let's switch gears and tell you a bit about Upbound. Upbound is the company behind Crossplane. We are the company that created the project. We are the company that open sourced the project and donated it to the CNCF. We build a set of product offerings around Crossplane, all geared around enabling enterprises to adopt the approach of using control planes to manage their infrastructure. We're trusted by many organizations that you would recognize. We work with all these companies to help accelerate their time to market and help them adopt control planes and get into that single point of control for their multi-cloud and hybrids and on-premises infrastructure. We have a set of offerings. Starting with downstream distribution of Crossplane that we call UXP, Upbound Universal Crossplane. It is a hardened, production-ready enterprise distribution of Crossplane. Super simple to use, a drop-in replacement for Crossplane, and obviously comes with an SLA and support plan that you expect from an enterprise distribution. we have a product called Upbound Cloud, and it offers a single point of control for all your infrastructure and gives you observability and visibility into what your teams are creating and how they relate to backend infrastructure, and a full collaboration experience for the platform teams to be able to do their work. And then finally, the Upbound Registry, which is a community library where people can compose and publish their providers and their configurations of infrastructure, as well as be able to kind of fork and start from a known reference point as opposed to starting from scratch. If this sounds interesting to you, we'd love to talk to you guys. Here's my information. I would love to chat about using control planes to get you that single point of control in your infrastructure. If you're using Kubernetes today, I would highly recommend you look at Crossplane to extend what you're doing today with GitOps or with Kubernetes to beyond containers. Or if you're starting to look at essentially modernizing your kind of infrastructure, I'd highly recommend you look at Crossplane as a starting point. And we're happy to talk at any time. This is my presentation. I'd love to take questions at this point.
Great presentation, Bassam. We do have some questions for you. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up a poll question for everyone out there in the audience that says, what additional information would you like about the Upbound solution? And we'll leave that up while we take your questions. First question I see here that came in, they're asking, does Crossplane only orchestrate apps that are deployed as containers?
No, in fact, we have a lot of customers that don't even use containers. The idea of using a Crossplane and the idea of using a control plane is not limited to containers. We have customers that use mostly Lambda or functions as a service type solutions, and they use Crossplane to deploy and manage those and connect them up to other cloud infrastructure. While Kubernetes started in the container space, and most people think of Kubernetes as a container orchestration system, we hope that with Crossplane that idea of a control plane can be extended to other workloads and other domains, and nothing in the Crossplane community limits it to containers.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great to know. Next question, can I utilize a CI/CD system with Upbound?
Yes, very much. In fact, we work with a number of popular ones, whether it's the GitLabs or the Spinnakers or Circle, etc. All of them should work out of the gate, and that they work out of the gate because the Crossplane sits behind the Kubernetes API line, and so any CI/CD system that today integrates into Kubernetes will be supported for Crossplane. If you're using things like Argo or Flux, there's great support for that as well. So you can install Argo or Flux into your clusters and do a GitOps approach directly from your Git repos and manage all your infrastructure using a GitOps pipeline.
Very nice. Let's see, Bradford's asking, is there commercial support available for Crossplane?
Yes, Upbound offers a distribution of Crossplane that comes with commercial support, as well as a set of product offerings, including Upbound Cloud and Registry. We bundle it all into a subscription that you can be part of, and we can even include implementation services and other things that you need to help you kind of accelerate your journey into using control planes.
Very nice. And then there's a question here, it's really long. I'm just going to kind of summarize it as, can you kind of tell us about partners or customers who have adopted and used Upbound successfully?
Yeah, there's a number of these customers that are now, because we are a CNCF project, you can go read about all the customers that are nominated to speak about Crossplane and their production deployments of it. But I'll mention a few names: Deutsche Bahn, the big railroad company, Plotly, Mercedes-Benz, Adobe, and a number of other companies that we are working with in deploying Crossplane in production and running it.
Nice, very nice. And then next question, what about, does Crossplane work with all versions of Kubernetes?
Yes, it does. In fact, we keep, we follow the versioning policy of Kubernetes itself, and it is compatible with all known and supported versions of Kubernetes.
Very nice. And then there's a question here that wanted to know if Crossplane can be used to manage AWS resources.
Yes, it can manage AWS resources as well as other cloud vendors. And in fact, you can manage multiple resources from multiple vendors within the same control plane. So we have customers that are able to create portable compositions, portable abstractions that can be deployed could be bound at runtime to select the vendor of choice. And we have customers that are just running on one cloud that use Crossplane to reduce the surface area and offer a self-service experience to their developers.
Very nice. So I know we're running out of time here in our live Q&A. What should folks do to get started with Upbound?
I'd encourage you to go to upbound.io and reach out to us, as well as join the Crossplane Slack community. It's a great place to learn about Crossplane and interact with other folks in the community and get going.
Excellent.
All information's on upbound.io. You can start there.
Upbound.io. All right. Excellent. Well, great presentation. Thanks so much for being on the EcoCast today, Bassam.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And I encourage everyone also to check out the Handouts tab. There's a resource there on Upbound Cloud, and you can download that now and check it out after the EcoCast. So make sure you grab that before you go. There's also links in there to the official Slack channel for Crossplane, links to hands-on training, and how to contact Upbound to chat more and get a personal demo of Crossplane. So make sure that you check out that resource. Also, don't forget about the poll question that's on the screen there. If you haven't answered that, I encourage you to do that now. I'll leave it up while I announce our final Amazon $500 gift card winner. This is going out to Eduardo Zaragoza from Georgia. Congratulations, Eduardo Zaragoza from Georgia. I'll post all the prize winners' names in the questions pane. All right. Thank you to everyone who responded there to the poll. We do appreciate your feedback. I know the folks at Upbound do as well. Before you go, I want to remind you to subscribe to the 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes store. You can do that wherever you listen to your podcast. There's also the new Gorilla Guide podcast as well. If you haven't seen that yet, make sure that you check that out in your iTunes store or wherever you listen to podcasts. And then, of course, if you want to sponsor or present on an upcoming MegaCast or EcoCast, reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. I hope to see you on our upcoming MegaCast, actually happening tomorrow, on understanding your cloud-native data protection and disaster recovery options. This is a big MegaCast event. There's going to be some awesome prizes on there. So hope to see you on that event. In fact, we'll be giving out 10 Oculus VR Quest 2 headsets on that event, as well as Amazon $500 gift cards every 30 minutes. So hope to see you on tomorrow's MegaCast to learn about protecting your cloud-native applications with data protection and DR solutions. And then before you go, don't forget about our Refer a Friend website or landing page there. You'll be redirected to that right after the event here. And it's there that you can enter your friends' IT coworkers. And, we promise not to spam them. Hope that you want to share what we're doing here with your IT friends and coworkers. Thanks again to everyone who joined us on the EcoCast today on supporting and enabling modern applications. I hope that you learned a lot. I know that I did. Have a great day. See you next time.